Welcome to GenX Adulting, and today we have Dr. Patrick Lynch with us, or better known as Pat. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're very happy to have you. So our first
Awesome.
question we always ask is, what year were you born?
1970,
So you are Gen X.
definitely.
And where were you born?
Stanford Hospital, Palo Alto, California.
Oh,
Oh, cool.
okay, in
Yeah.
California. So how
hmm
long did you live in Palo Alto, California?
I don't remember a day of being there, honestly. I lived there probably for a year tops,
Okay.
and then my parents moved to Portland, Lake Oswego area.
So were your parents from Palo Alto?
Well, not necessarily. My mom and dad were both from Illinois, and then they moved, or my dad's parents and family moved to uh, there's a town down there that starts with an A. I can't remember what it's named, and then they all migrated to Santa Cruz area.
Okay.
Cool.
And
Yeah,
then do you know how they met?
yeah, they met in high school.
Oh, they were high school sweethearts.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then did they go to college together?
Um, I don't think so. No, I think my mom went to college maybe for a year or two. I don't think that she received I'm pretty certain she didn't receive a bachelor's. My dad went to University of San Francisco. I believe it was either San Francisco, yeah, University of San Francisco,
And
uh,
go
for
ahead,
his
I'm sorry.
BA.
Okay.
Yeah,
And was your mom, did she work or was she stay-at-home mom?
she was a stay-at-home mom.
And then what did your dad do?
My dad was an attorney. He continued his education once we moved to Portland, and went to law school at Lewis and Clark.
And do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a brother, and I have an adopted brother.
And
Actually, she's a sister now.
okay. So
Yeah,
they had, are you the youngest?
I'm the oldest.
So it's you, your brother, and what's the spacing between you and your brother?
3 years.
And then they adopted a little girl?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's
Biological boy. Um,
Oh, okay.
and
So biological boy,
yeah,
trans girl.
exactly.
And
Uh,
what's the spacing there for between you and her?
good question. I think when I was 27, she was 3 at the time,
Okay.
Mm.
or maybe
Wide
even
spacing.
younger.
Okay,
So
very wide spacing.
yeah, very wide. Yeah.
And then did you basically grow up in Portland? Did they stay there for a long time through your formative years?
We grew up in Portland until I was about 13, and then my dad and myself and my brother moved to Sun River, uh, to with the intention to sell the ranches in Portland to buy another ranch in Central Oregon. And so meanwhile, my stepmom, uh, closed up her practice. She's an OBGYN, and she wanted to wrap up her practice there, sell the ranch, while I went to school in Sun River. And while my dad, he didn't start a practice, but he joined a law firm in Bend, Oregon, a year before my mom came and joined him. But they saw each other on the weekends and so forth.
Okay, so wait. So your parents owned a ranch in Portland?
Yeah, they had a couple of small ranches. They had a 5-acre horse ranch and a 10-acre horse ranch with a few acres of Concord grapes.
Wow. Where, so
Yeah,
for everyone, I didn't clarify, we're talking about Oregon. We're in Oregon now.
yeah.
Where in Portland specifically
Oh,
were those ranches?
Tigard area, Bull Mountain.
Okay. And
Yeah.
back then, there was nothing out there.
It's
Oh
probably all
yeah.
houses now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the 5-acre ranch, which was
Yeah.
probably one of the more beautiful properties that I'd seen, was completely demolished, and now there's probably 50 houses on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
that's true because I know we lived in Aloha when I was in third grade. There was nothing out there. And I think that whole area is in
yeah.
Hillsboro. I think that's all built out and that was nothing.
hmm
Okay. So you said your mom was a stay-at-home mom. Your
Yes.
dad was an attorney.
Yes,
But
is still.
when you is still attorney, when you
Yeah.
turned 13, did they divorce?
No, they divorced when I was about, my mom and my dad divorced when I was probably 6.
Okay, so they
Yeah,
divorced when you were 6,
yeah.
and then your dad remarried?
Yeah, he basically he got together with my stepmom, and um, they remarried, or they got together pretty much right away, and um, they married when I was about 10, maybe 4 years after they got together.
And did your mom remarry?
Yes, she did.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're that typical Gen X childhood of divorced parents
Yes.
who remarried,
Yeah.
stepdad,
Hmm.
stepmom.
Hmm.
Did your stepmom, okay, so your stepmom and dad adopted your sister, the adopted sister. Did
Yeah.
your mom and stepdad have any more children?
No. Oh, he came with 2 or 3 kids or something like that, and yeah, but they
Okay, so
didn't
you
have any more
had
children.
step siblings.
I did, but we never knew each other.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
never spent any time with them.
No. Maybe I met one of them once.
Now, when your parents divorced when you were 6,
Hmm.
were you primarily with your mom or with your dad? Did you go to your mom or dad?
I was primarily with my mom for a short period of time, and then I went to my dad.
And so when you were with your mom, was it like with your dad on the weekends, that type of custody, or did you see your dad more
Honestly,
frequently?
my childhood was, I was pretty alone during my childhood, so I don't remember much in regards to just being by myself quite a bit, or with my brother. Um, but I don't. If I was with my mom or my dad, I don't remember being with either one of them very much.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there's just you it's kind of fuzzy for you. You were either with one of the parents, but during those younger years,
yeah.
was it just kind of like chaos a little bit?
It was. I mean, when during the separation, it was everything was just kind of up in the air, and I was with my mom, I remember that, and I think I may have visited with my dad once, and that's all I can remember. um, and and then I went with my dad. We moved into a house in Lake Grove, uh, him and I and my brother, while he dated my stepmom, and I barely ever saw him, and that I can remember. I mean, maybe I did see him,
Yeah,
more, but I just don't remember seeing him very much. And my brother and I, we were free. We were free birds. I was 6 and he was 3, and we were riding our bikes around the neighborhood, riding our bikes
Hmm.
down to the store, and
yeah.
going down to the lake, and just a couple little kids just cruising
Typical
around. Yeah,
typical feral Gen X kids. No one's watching
absolutely.
you,
Yeah,
not supervised at all. No
exactly.
one knows what's happening to
Yeah,
you. You guys were just completely
yeah.
independent,
Hmm.
surviving, not even worried or aware of any danger.
Right.
Do you know why you went to live with your dad? And why you left your mom's?
I honestly don't know. I I've been told, a couple of things by both sides, and I don't really know. And
Okay.
all I know is um, I don't really have parents. I don't have parents that ever really seemed to uh, I don't know, just love their children, and so it's okay. It is what it is. It seems to be
Right.
typical Gen X, but God was always my. I always felt close to God. God is my mom, my dad, my friend, and so that's where I've always attuned myself. And I actually remember being 3 years old in a house in Lake Oswego. It was a little 3-acre farm with a barn and a pasture and a couple horses, and that my mom had, and it was just kind of this weird haunted like house, and just have some weird memories there. And I remember I stayed in this room downstairs, and my parents lived upstairs, or not lived, but that's where their bedroom was. And
Yeah,
here I am,
yeah.
like 2 or 3 years old in a completely different part of the huge house,
Hmm.
and in my own room, and that the only person down on the first story is the little kid. And I'm like, I was scared at night,
Jeez.
I wanted to be with my parents
And your
and
brother wasn't even born yet, so it's
no,
just you, right?
yeah,
Did you have
yeah.
any pets, like a dog or anything?
Yeah, yeah, we had a little dog uh, later on. Sheba was his name, and but at any rate, I don't remember him ever being present at that time. But there was a time when I was just laying in bed one night, and I was just scared, and I was bummed. I was bummed at my parents. They, that I just didn't see him much, and that they just didn't seem to connect with me like I wanted to connect with them. And so I was laying in bed one night and I'm wide awake and I see this translucent or this transparent like donut shaped circle about probably like 3.5 feet high, just kind of on the opposite side of the room. It seemed to have consciousness. I mean, I know this sounds far out and everything, but
No, no.
this is just my experience,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And so I see this orange kind of yellowish donut like kind of like circle around the room and then when I looked at it and I expressed a little fear, it kind of backed up a little bit and then I was like, okay, that responded to my consciousness. That's weird. And then it would kind of creep over a little bit more towards towards my bed, towards my side wall that was my bed was up against almost. And then I would just be like, okay, that's kind of weird. Then it would back off a little bit, and then it would come forward, then it would back off, and then it would just finally just in a nice smooth way just come over to the side of my bed and just hang there and glow. And then I was like, okay, you're not going to hurt me. And then it would back up a little bit, and then I'll be like, you're here to just kind of be with me, maybe. I don't know. You're cool. You're a good guy or whatever. And then it would come a little bit more forward, and then it would just hang out there. And I was just like, okay, this is weird, but and then I thought, angel, maybe you're an angel. Maybe you're just here to, maybe you're just letting me know that you're watching over me. And
Mhm.
it just stayed there, for a minute. And then I was like, oh, okay. Well,
W
even though this is weird,
Wild.
this is cool. And and then I just went to sleep.
Did it
So
And
ever come back? Or was that like a
it never
one-time
came back. It
thing?
was a one-time thing. Yeah.
Yeah, what a trip.
so
I
did
know.
you
Yeah.
feel comfort off of it?
I did. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
brought you comfort.
It did. Hmm.
And obviously it lingered with you
It
because
did. Yeah.
you're what, 55 now, if I'm doing
Yeah,
the math
it
right?
definitely stayed with me. I have, lots of incidences throughout my life that let me know that I'm being taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even
Not
though
taken care of, but just kind of
yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah, that
watched over.
How
Yeah.
someone's
old were
there.
you again when
I was like 3.
Yeah,
You
that's wow, that's like a core
Yeah.
seminal memory.
Well, they say
Yeah.
that children can see to the other side,
Yeah.
and then they reach an age where they can't anymore. But the
Mhm.
spirits, angels, all that, they see that. And
Mhm.
I've read and seen where they say if your child, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds pointing in a corner talking to something, it's
Mhm.
there. They
Yeah.
can see because they're
Yeah.
so pure, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it sounds like you didn't have secure attachment.
Mhm.
Your parents did not give you space
Mhm.
to give you secure attachment to them,
Mhm.
either
Mhm.
your mom or your dad, which is really
Mhm.
unusual because it's not unusual to not be securely attached to a father figure in a lot of situations for people, but for you to
Right.
not have that with your mom,
Mhm.
it's very interesting. And did you
Yeah.
find that your brother had the same like and this isn't his story, but just have did you guys
Shared
ever,
experience.
discuss if that was a shared experience for you guys, or did he have a different take on it?
Oh, it was a shared experience. I remember, I don't remember too much, from that era, but I do remember a bit. And I do remember his room was upstairs. And I remember a crib in the middle of the room with nothing on the walls, nothing else in the room besides some things that were scattered along the wall of the room. And it was a fairly decent sized room.
Mhm.
And I would go in there and, he would be in there like making sounds, making noises. He could stand up. At least I remember he could stand up in the crib holding on to the crib, and he was yelling or something, and I went in there, and I remember he had thrown like poop all over the place, like on the
Mhm.
walls, on the
Yeah.
floor. And I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, Benji, why did you do this? And he couldn't talk yet. He was just kind of like happy to see me.
Yeah. They do that
Yeah.
though. I remember,
Yeah.
like, babies will
Oh, yeah.
sometimes get in their own pants. But
Hmm.
Absolutely.
but what you're describing is it doesn't sound like it was a warm environment.
It, my dad was gone a lot. He was in law school and he worked. He worked for a judge, and I didn't see him very much. I
Yeah.
can recall seeing him in that house for, maybe the 4 years that I lived there or so, give or take. I think I remember maybe 3 times.
Wow.
Um, my mom, she was overwhelmed. And, I remember when she wanted me to take a nap in the middle of the day, I felt it was because she wanted some space. And, and at the same time, she had space already, because
Yeah.
I was like in this sandbox. It was almost like I was whatever I was doing, I felt like I was forced to be there.
Right.
And, my mom was doing something else. She was either like riding horses or, I don't know. I don't know what she was doing, but, she was a loving mom, and she was my person. And she, she told me that she loved me, and, she was there for me.
Mhm.
Um, but she was overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, so you and your dad and your brother moved to Sun River, and you said he bought a ranch there?
No, they just rented a house in Sun
Okay.
River while they were looking for a ranch in Central Oregon.
Okay.
And while we were there for a year, I went to the Sun River Prep School, preparatory school.
Okay.
It wasn't a public school, it was a private school. It was a lot of fun. It's a little resort community, and I was kind of like the class clown. And I ended up, they had, instead of getting a kicked out basis, they had an invite back basis. And
Mm.
I was one and two kids who did not get invited back to Sun River Preparatory School. And so my parents definitely didn't want me anymore. And I thought it would be best. I didn't want to be around them either. And anyway, they ended up buying a 100-acre horse ranch out in Prineville. And so before they moved out there, I was shipped off to the top military school in the United States, Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia. And
So was that did you bring that up? You're saying you didn't wanna be there anymore, or did they bring
well,
it up?
they brought it up. They brought up boarding school, military school, Catholic schools, and they said if I didn't go there, I'd probably end up in McLaren. And I don't know if you know what
Mm.
McLaren is. And I was just like, they said it
Was it
was some sort of jail for kids. And I'm
like
just like,
juvie kind of?
yeah. And I'm
Like
just like,
juvenile
dude,
detention?
I'm not a bad kid,
Well, what were you doing at this, private school? What kinda stuff were you doing?
We took a trip to San Francisco once, and I don't know why, but our class took a trip to San Francisco, and I bought some stink bombs down there. Those little bottles with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Yes.
solution in there, and I put a stink bomb down the heater vent in the bathroom of the school, and it got into the heating system and stunk up the whole school.
That's pretty good,
and
actually.
uh, and so they wanted to they shut down the school for that day, and they were, I heard them talk about hiring a plumber, and they
Oh
talked
my
about
gosh.
the plumber needing to, dig up the floor in the bathroom, in case something pipe broke. And so then I went into the principal's office and I said, hey, look, you don't need to do any of this. I did this. It was a little stink bomb. I put it down the heater vent. He was like, oh, Patrick, what am I going to do with you? I'm like, I'm not going to kick you out of school, but this is thank you for telling me, we
Yeah.
could have just spent thousands of dollars trying to figure this out. And,
Yeah.
it's thank you for sharing. And so that was one thing. And, another thing was I had a I had a crush on this girl who now, we're still good friends, and I didn't know how to act with girls back then. I was in the eighth grade, and I had this felt tip pen. It was like a marker, and I put it down on her chair before she sat down, and she sat down on it, and she had this brand new Ralph Lauren dress or skirt,
Oh. Oh
and she
no.
sat down, and it was all marked up, and she
Oh.
was like, she wasn't like mad, but she was just like, Patrick,
Yeah.
this is like my brand new skirt, and I was just like, oh shit. And
Yeah.
I'm in trouble now, what did I just do? And so then the administration found out about it, and I kind of got a talking to, and I paid to have her skirt cleaned, and the marker came out, of her skirt, thank God.
Good.
And then I was just a pickle, like I would
Yeah.
fart in class,
Yeah.
like one
You were
time,
a kid.
You
like
were a
I
kid.
was a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a
Exactly. I was
kid.
a kid. My son is the same way.
Yeah.
And so one time I didn't get in trouble. In fact, I didn't tell a soul this. And
Okay. Okay.
um and my dad said something like I fell or something like that. And he said, smooth move, X-Lax. And I'm like, X-Lax, what's that? And he was like, oh, you don't know what X-Lax is? I'm like, no. And he was like, well, it's a pill that you take to help you go poo if you're
Yeah.
constipated. And you don't want to take too much of it because you have diarrhea. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh no.
And so I went down to the drugstore and I bought a fucking box of X-Lax, and I'm looking at the person at the register, and they're looking at me like, what are you doing with that?
That
And
is
so,
awesome. This is so Gen X, by the
This
way.
should be on the record. This is
all
good.
right, you can leave it on the record. Nobody got hurt.
Okay,
And
yes, this is
plus I
so
was a
Gen X.
kid. Yeah. So at any rate, and so
What'd you
then
do with
I
it?
just took the box, and I put all the capsules. The teachers make this huge thing of soup every day. It was like
Oh
this
my God.
5-gallon pot of soup or something like that, and I was just like, blah, 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 just
Oh,
put all the capsules in there and stirred it around and
wait, so you
left.
snuck in, I'm sorry, you snuck into the kitchen, the
Hmm.
cafeteria, the kitchen. Let's
Yeah.
also look at that. That's amazing. You snuck
Yeah.
into the kitchen, quickly put a bunch of X-Lax in, and you had the time to do all that. That takes
Yeah.
some guts,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then, it wasn't long after that. It was probably within the hour. I heard some farting. I heard some
That's
teachers
hilarious.
walking back and forth in the bathrooms going, oh boy, something in that soup.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. That's it. So
Something
did
about that soup.
every teacher got hit?
Everybody who ate that soup, yeah, they had
And
the had the
you knew it
shit.
was
I
going
did,
on.
and I didn't tell a soul.
So they didn't know you did that.
They didn't know I did it. Nobody knew I did that.
That's
That's amazing.
hilarious.
That's like
Yeah.
epic Gen X.
Yeah.
That's like in a movie. That'd be in a
Uh-huh.
movie that we would watch. That's like
Yeah.
back when we were kids,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
That's
That's
pretty.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, and Brian
Yeah.
did his own little troublemaking stuff. I think Pat has you.
I have not pulled something that epic
That
off.
is
That's pretty
epic.
good.
That is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I would be telling your son about that. That's pretty. That's
Because
a,
I'm sure they had, digestional issues for the
yeah,
next couple days, I would assume. Never done
Probably.
X-Lax, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure they were shitting their pants literally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Probably.
like I
Yeah.
love that. And you know what's so great is that
Yeah.
what it was your dad who said to you, smooth move X-Lax. Like that was something Gen
Yes.
Xers as kids
Yeah.
we heard from
We
people.
used to say it.
We used to
Yeah,
say
it's
Yeah.
it.
a
It's
thing.
like a Gen X
Yeah.
saying. So I love that you
Totally.
then took that and did a full-on Gen X epic moment with that. That's pretty cool. The X-Lax
Yeah.
moment. That's
That's
awesome.
funny.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they didn't know about that, but they knew
Yeah.
about the stink bomb. They knew about the marker. And then in general,
Yeah.
maybe you were a bit of a handful, so you weren't
I
invited
was.
back. And
Yeah.
then
They
how
told
did
me that if I went to counseling and I
mhm.
saw a psychiatrist or a psychologist or something like that, and I hashed out my whatever it was that was wrong with me, then I could reapply. And my parents were like, and so I went to this psychiatrist, and my parents didn't like what was happening with the psychiatrist because I was telling the psychiatrist what was going on in my
Yeah, yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And my parents are like, well, wait a minute, this is about us now, and we can't have that. And so, then we were looking at boarding schools. And so then I was like, okay, military school, boarding school, basically school for pussies or a school for, to become a man. And I was like, all right, I want to go to military school. So we started looking at military academies, and I went to the #1 military academy in the United States.
So did
Yeah,
you choose that or did they find that for you? Or
I
did you
chose
research?
it.
You
Yeah.
researched and found.
Well, we researched together, and we talked about, the schools that were, potentials. And I was just like, I like Riverside. Riverside looks good.
So what I
And
find interesting is that instead of going to the root of why you might have had some of this, well, some of this is just general boy 8th
mm-hmm,
grade stuff.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But if there was other things going on, instead of
mm-hmm,
getting to the root of that and maybe
mm-hmm.
finding out why you might be doing some of these things or finding out
Yeah,
why some of this behavior is happening,
yeah,
um, that was swept under the rug, and
mm-hmm,
instead you were sent away. So I find that to be an interesting way to go
yeah,
about it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, so that would basically mean you finished 8th grade and then went to military school for high school.
Straight into military school, ninth through 12th grade. Yeah.
So what was that like? What like when you
Yes.
arrived, what was the whole
Yeah, good
getting there
question.
from your life?
When I was arrived, it was like, I mean, if you can imagine being a a nerd going to the Citadel, it was intense. It was all military. The only thing different was, you go to class instead of you go to work for 8 hours or 6 hours of the day or whatever it was. It was intense. It
So
was extremely military oriented.
okay, so what
Mhm.
was your schedule? Was it, I assume it was regular core classes?
Yeah, so we wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then we have room inspection. And then we have to have basically shit shower and shaved, and we have to have our brass shined, our clothes starched, our shoes shined, our belt buckles shined, our beds made with hospital corners, so you could basically bounce a quarter off the bed. Have to have the toilets clean, the shower clean, the floor clean, our lockers cleaned and organized a certain way. We have to have everything immaculate. We lived in barracks. We had concrete floors. We had doors and windows that didn't have weather stripping. It got super hot in the summer, super cold in the winter, and with floor heaters. And then we would have room inspection. After room inspection, we would go up to the blacktop for formation, where we would form up in our companies and our platoons. And we would go through morning inspection, which is individual inspection in ranks, where platoon leader, platoon sergeant, or squad leader would inspect us personally to make sure that we're shaved, everything's clean, brass shined, everything like that. And then we would march around. We have the companies who were in first place for the week, first place through fifth place. It was all about um, the administration going through the barracks and seeing which barracks were the cleanest during the week. And the first place barrack they could just walk right into the mess hall and eat one platoon at a time. The rest of the platoons, they would march around the blacktop until it was time for them, to go in. And so after that, then we'd have breakfast. We'd go back to our rooms for 10, 15 minutes at best. And then either we would be off to class, or we would have morning assembly, where we would, assemble in this church-like cathedral thing. And then, after that, we would have classes. And then after classes, we'd have drill. Drill is where we have, military oriented drill. Then we would have athletics. Then we would have free time for an hour or two. Then we would, get dressed again in our dress grays, and go up to the blacktop for formation again, and march around until it was time for each platoon to eat. And then after that, after we ate, we would have study hall. Either if you kept your grades above C's, you could stay in your room and study for the rest of the night. or you could, and if you got a C or below, then you'd have to actually go to a study hall and study. And then TAPS was lights out was 10 o'clock.
Wow.
Yeah,
And that was every day,
every day.
even Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday, Sunday was a little bit more loose. Wednesdays we had town day after school instead of drill. And if we didn't have excess demerits, then we can go on leave or we could go into town. And we had to, well, on Wednesdays, we had to go in town in uniform. When we went on leave and we checked out, as soon as we were off campus, we can get out of uniform if we wanted. Um, but if we had too many demerits, then people would get on what's called bull ring. Bull ring is where you'd march around in your fatigues all around the school campus, and you'd roll down hills, and you'd do obstacle courses, and you just each demerit was in excess was 20 minutes of bull ring. And so you'd have these guys who were bull ringers for life. They always had 100 plus demerits, and they never could go on leave. They never could go into town, and they were just always on bull ring. And
Wow. What
and
about you?
I think I was maybe on bull ring once for like maybe an hour or something like that.
Okay. And I
Yeah,
think that just shows also how your behavior was normal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I thrived in military school. I did really well.
Were you there for 4 years, or
I
was it?
was.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. I didn't know that.
yeah.
So you had graduated high school from Riverside Military Academy.
I did. Yeah,
That's cool.
What was
yeah.
Gainesville, Georgia like? The town, like you said, you would go into
Hmm.
town. What was the town like?
It was pretty cool. It was kind of like just kind of like maybe Beaverton or something like that,
Mm, mhm, mhm.
It was, back in the mid 80s. So it was pretty wild, and, it was a very cultural place. There was a lot of different black and white, basically,
How
Yeah,
close is it
diverse.
to
yeah.
Atlanta? Where is it in relationship to
It's
Atlanta?
about, I would say, maybe an hour or two from Atlanta. I can't really remember, but it was a little bit of a ways.
So probably
Um,
south or west? Or I guess it would
it's
be east, maybe.
so Gainesville is north of Atlanta.
North.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah, it's almost on the border, and we were 20 minutes from the Dahlonega Ranger Camp, which was uh, North Georgia.
yes, that's
Um,
close to probably semi close to Chattanooga area.
I think so.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
beautiful there. Actually,
Yeah,
North
it
Georgia,
is.
that's
North
mountainous.
Georgia is
it
It's
is.
beautiful.
beautiful.
It is. Yeah,
It is. And
yeah,
also coming from Oregon,
Yeah.
anywhere
hmm
would be diverse. Let's be real.
yeah, for sure.
But then
Yeah,
to go to
especially Bend.
Georgia, yeah.
Yeah,
But then to go to
yeah.
Georgia, that was probably pretty cool to get to
hmm
the East Coast and to
hmm
see kind of more
I
real,
loved the
real
South.
life, I guess, like a melting
Yeah,
pot of America. I'm sure that was
yeah,
really cool.
yeah. It was beautiful there. It was colonial.
Yeah.
Um, it was there were fireflies there. It was really
Yeah.
green.
Yes.
I love the accent. I love the hospitality of
Yep.
the
South.
civilian life there. It was just incredibly amazing. I
Now,
had a girlfriend. Go
I
ahead.
was just about to say, did you meet any girls?
I did, yeah. I had a girlfriend there. Her name was Faye. I don't know her last name. I can't remember her last name. And she was typical Southern belle, blonde
Mm,
hair, blue eyes, and just a really total sweetheart. And we had a great time together. She was a Southern Baptist, and I went to her. She wanted me to go to church with her, and
mm.
and so I went to church with her, and she's like, whatever you do, if somebody ever asks you if you're saved, just tell them yes. And I'm like, all right. So as soon as I went into church, people would ask me, "Are you saved? Are you saved? Are you saved?" And I'd be like, "Yes, yes, yes, yes." And they're like, "Okay, good, good, good."
That
And
sounds about right. Yeah.
and they were hooting and hollering in church, and people would run up to the altar and cry and wail, and I'm like, please don't ever do that. And and
Yeah.
then and then when they would run up to the altar, their family members would come up and they'd put their hands on them, and then the minister would come over and speak in tongues and do all this stuff, and I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Here I am I went to Episcopal Church in Portland, St. Mark's, over on 21st and Lovejoy, I think it was. And so that was my experience with church. And so this was quite a
Yeah.
bit different.
Mhm.
And, and then one day she did run up to the altar and I'm like, oh no. And and then her sister's like, elbowing me like, get up there. And I'm like, and do what? And she's like,
Yeah.
just go up there. And I'm like, all right. And so I just went up there and I put my hand on her and she was crying and doing her thing. And I'm like, and when we get out of there, I'm like, what'd you do that for? She's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like, you just wanted to go up there
Yeah.
and cry? She's like, I don't know. I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
Well,
That's funny.
The Southern
Yeah.
Baptist church experience is quite an experience, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like nothing else.
I
It's
thought it
like
was pretty
nothing else.
awesome. It's
Yeah.
it's it's America. It's their faith. It's
Yeah.
what it is, you know.
Yeah. Did you
I
guys stay
love it.
together all through all 4 years?
No, no, I was pretty single and into my zone for you know, 2 years, and then I met her my junior year and we dated through junior and my senior year.
Okay. And then did
Yeah.
you stay in touch with her
No,
after?
no, once I was
Oh,
gone, I was gone. It's like I went back to Oregon and I was like it was life was weird for me, because I didn't have a home base.
yeah.
I couldn't go. It's like once I graduated, my parents already had a place for me to go. They did not want me home. And so as soon as I get home, like 3 days later, I was in Ashland.
Okay,
And
so
so
I was just gonna say, let's circle back real quick.
yeah.
When you were in the military, in military school,
hmm
and it was so regimented and you were able to
hmm
go into town, but were you able to play sports and stuff?
Yeah, so we had, things that we could participate in. We had school sports, we had a football team, basketball team, baseball, soccer, track and field. I was on the track team and the basketball team. I was also a part of the Fusiliers, and
What's that?
Fusiliers is the rifle drill team where you spin rifles in
Uh,
ranks.
oh,
And
cool.
uh, and so we would travel around to the different military bases in the South, and we would compete against other military schools. And for 2 years, I was on the drill team, um, and I got really good. And we ended up winning. Well, we were 2/10 of a point or something like that from winning nationals. So we were
Wow.
runner-up national champions, and we had an amazing team. It was incredible, and we were badass, and we've traveled to, like, Fort Bragg, Fort Rucker, Fort Benning, um, Western Carolina University, which they had a ROTC program there, um, and a couple
That,
other
that is
That's
so
military
cool.
cool.
bases.
That is so
What's that?
cool.
Was
Yeah,
your traveling, was it all through like buses or flying?
yeah, buses.
Okay, so you got to see
Yeah,
the countryside. Those are not that
yeah,
close. Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. And then they
That's
took the
beautiful.
top 40. Yeah, it was amazing. They took the top 40 kids in the school every year during the summer to take them through a basic training activity before you become, higher ranking individuals. And so I went after my sophomore year, and we did things like we would go up to the Ranger training camp, and we would go through exercises there. And up in Dahlonega, Georgia, we go to Fort Benning, and we go through a jump program down there, and an obstacle course training down there, and just kind of tour the area. And then we went up to a military base in Tennessee, and we would shoot M14s on 300-yard firing ranges with
Cool.
Nice.
tracer bullets. Um,
Nice.
and we did some rock climbing and some rappelling and stuff like that.
Cool.
And it was a lot of fun.
I'm sure there was a lot of bonding. Did you stay in touch with any of your, what is it? Wouldn't be called classmates, right? What,
Cadets.
cadets?
Yeah, yeah, they were referred to as cadets, but we refer to each other as friends,
Okay.
or a lot of the guys, we were kind of known as rats, Riverside
Hmm.
rats. We were the rats of the town, and our school bordered a Lake Lanier, which is this huge
Mm.
lake, and we would sneak out of the barracks and go swim, and
You know, there's stories
sometimes.
about Lake Lanier.
Oh yeah,
You know those stories, right? It's like
I know.
haunted
Oh
and
yeah, I know all kinds of crazy stuff that went on in Lake Lanier.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty gutsy. You swam in Lake
Well,
Lanier.
I'm sure you didn't know back then, or it was all myth or
well, there's lots of
folklore.
bodies in Lanier.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It's a very
Yeah.
racist location, especially
Oh,
Forsyth
yeah.
County. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. I
yeah,
didn't know that aspect of it.
yeah,
Lynchings and shit. Sure. That's the
yeah,
deep south.
yeah. There are towns up there where you had to be, if you were black, you had to be out of town. It's before sundown, and if
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
then there was problems. Yeah.
Even when you were there in the mid '80s, or are you talking more back in the '50s? Even
Oh
in the
yeah,
'80s?
Oh,
definitely. Yeah.
let's face it. That, that, uh, that black guy who was out running got killed a couple of years ago by
Yeah,
the
that's
father and
true.
son,
That's
right?
true,
There's
that's
some
true. Ugh.
bad shit still
That's
going
Uh,
on.
yeah. Yeah.
so
But
do you stay in touch with any of them? Any of your friends from there?
no, not really. Everybody just kind of scattered. Some people disappeared. I tried connecting with some people and have connected with some people, but people are just really kind of deep into their own thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's across the country, um, and so I kept in touch a
No
little bit here
Facebook.
and there.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was no
Yeah.
Facebook back then. It
No,
was all
no.
landlines. I do have a
No.
question.
Yeah.
Were the most of your cadets or the rats, were they there from a similar background as yourself? Like, my parents are shipping me off to military academy, or is this a conduit and a path into the military?
Yeah, that's a good question. For very few individuals, it was a conduit and a path into the military. There were some military colonels and generals who had their sons go there. If we wanted to go to an academy, or if we were going to enlist, we could enlist with rank.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and if we wanted to go to an academy, it would look better if we went to this particular military school. I wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. I was pretty gung ho about it. And my dad was an attorney who worked with Mark Hatfield at the time, and I knew
Mhm.
the senator, and senator said, "Hey, if you do well, I'd be happy to give you an appointment." And I was like, "Okay, great, thanks." And and so I realized that I was colorblind and too tall to be a pilot, and plus I was just burned out on the military. Once I was done and I was ready to learn about society, ready to be a civilian.
Yeah.
And that's where Ashland was a beautiful place for me to learn how to learn who I was as a person.
Yeah. I
Bef-
was so
Yeah,
be-
curious about that. I was gonna ask if you did have an affinity towards one of the branches, but you kind of answered that.
yeah,
It seems like things kind of worked out pretty well there for you in terms of finding a groove, doing well. You didn't get many demerits. You got to do a lot of cool shit, but then
yeah.
you were done with it. You're ready to close that chapter, it sounds
Pretty
like.
much, yeah. I mean, I thought about it later on, but I thought about, if I wanted to go in, I wanted to become an officer. But I made the best of it, for what I did.
Yeah.
And, you know, um, my senior year, I was the platoon sergeant for a first platoon alpha company, they were all the fuck ups, and and in the school, and they were all the biggest, the tallest guys, the football players, the athletes. And so I was given first platoon alpha company, and I was like, all right, here we go. And I was doing push-ups all summer long because I knew that I was going to, get a job that was going to, require some some leadership skill, and being a leader, you don't have to do anything. You can just tell people what to do. You can be like, you open ranks, drop the platoon, go around, cuss at people, hit them, flick their ears when it's 30 below, whatever,
That's the
but
military, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but me, I was like, I wanted my platoon to be the best, and I wanted equal, like, I wanted to be an equal. I wanted to be a part of them. I wanted to be
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Mhm.
them. I wanted to be like, right, we're in this together. And so first day I remember I'm like, this Brad Gorham, he passed away, I think, but maybe that was somebody else. But at any rate, he was um an All-American football athlete. And when you're an athlete, you can get away with, all kinds of shit in school. And the first thing I said was like, all right, you guys, I know you guys don't want to be here. I know you guys don't like drill, but we're going to do this and we're going to be the best we can be because I'm your platoon leader and I'm not going to have a bunch of fuck ups. And Brad Gorham was spit and chew and ranks. And he was like, ah, shit, Lynch, whatever. And he spit some tobacco. And I'm like, all right, gave the command for open ranks, dropped the whole platoon, dropped in front of the platoon myself, which you don't have to being a platoon leader. I'm like, all right, you guys, I'll do push-ups with you all day long. Let's go. And so I did the down up thing, where, you could go like halfway down, hold it, and I could hold it forever. And Brad Gorham, here he is, he's struggling, and his pelvis is hitting the ground, and I'm like yelling at him, get your fucking pelvis off the ground, Gorham. And he was like, all right, all right. And, so we did that a couple of times. And then from then on, we were the best, man. And for senior ceremony, they give an award for best drill platoon in the battalion, and that was our platoon. So they gave
That's
me the award for
awesome.
that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it
that
was
just
pretty cool.
shows what a real leader you were because
Yeah.
you not just talk the talk, you walk the walk. You're like, whatever
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you to do, I can do it and better than you,
for sure. For
you
sure.
know? So you
Yeah.
Yeah.
earn their respect, like deep
Yeah.
down. They didn't
Yeah.
respect you out of fear. They
Right.
respected you as a man.
Right. Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. It was cool.
That's really awesome. So
Yeah.
just to circle back,
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned it. So you are colorblind.
Hmm.
When did you know you were colorblind?
I knew I was colorblind when I was a kid, but I didn't know that, I wasn't that colorblind, but I was colorblind enough.
Mhm.
And I didn't think that colorblindness it didn't even occur to me that it was going to be a factor being a pilot. And I got good grades all through school. I had a 3.5 average in my high school career. And so, but yeah, to answer your question, I was probably like, I don't know, maybe 10, maybe a little
Did a
younger.
doctor discover it? Did a teacher discover it, or was it you?
No, I couldn't play Candyland.
Oh,
Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
What a trip.
that's when you
yeah,
first discovered you were colorblind?
yeah,
Candyland?
yeah. It's like this. I couldn't get it right. And my dad's like, he would just anytime anything was ever wrong, he would just laugh at me. He did some stupid shit. And we were playing football one time, and he just fucking he's a football player. He went to San Francisco State or University, San Francisco, whatever, played football for them. And here I am, this 6-year-old, 5-year-old kid. He took the football and fucking just drilled it right into my face from like 50 feet away. Just perfect spiral. Just went bam,
Oh my
knocked my
god.
head back, almost knocked me over, just drilled the shit out of me. And I was just like, as soon as he did that, I lost complete trust in him. I was just
Yep,
like,
Yeah.
and he was
yep,
laughing at me. He laughed.
yeah.
And I was like, whoa, dude, I would never do that to my kid.
No,
Never,
no.
never.
No, I think
That's
again, I
wild.
think that's a Gen X childhood experience and
Yeah,
also some abuse in there. But,
yeah,
so then, yeah, it makes sense when you guys are playing Candyland, there was
yeah.
no empathy for the fact that you're
Yeah,
struggling.
exactly. That's why I mentioned that is because there was just the memory that I got from it kind of sits with me a little sour. He was
Of
just
course.
That's
laughing
wild.
about my what do you call it?
Like your
Uh,
inability to differentiate the colors
exactly.
on the game. So then what
Yeah.
happened? Did they take you to a doctor to get an actual diagnosis?
I don't recall, but I did at some point have a diagnosis. Yes.
So what colors can you see?
Good question. So, greens and reds, I get mixed up with. Not mixed up, but I don't see them as well.
Mhm.
Those glasses and chromas that people who have color blindness they wear. They used to advertise them what like 6 years ago or so.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I had a pair of those glasses, and those videos I've seen people put on those colorblind
Yes.
glasses, and they're like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
That's like how I felt when I put those on.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, this is, I mean, I see this world, pretty beautiful place. I'm in awe of this planet. But when I put those on, I'm just like, wow, you
Do you still
guys.
have them?
I do, yeah,
Yeah.
but they're all scratched up and I don't, they're not wearable anymore.
So
Yeah.
can you see pastels?
Not
Obviously
as,
not Candyland probably was as
yeah,
indicative, you couldn't.
yeah,
So,
pastels are difficult for me. And reds are difficult depending on the shade. Greens can be difficult. Greens and browns, they merge with me a
mm,
lot.
what
Yeah.
about blue?
Blue's pretty good. But sometimes I can't identify purples
Mm.
because the red I can't pick up. It's about the cones in your eyes, and I'm deficient in, some of the cones that allow you to see red.
So how would you say being colorblind has affected your life? Would you say it's been a significant factor in things or not really? Like, because people who aren't colorblind are probably very curious to the answer of that. How much does it affect your life?
It affects my life quite a bit. But when you first ask that question, I think to myself, well, it doesn't affect it at all. Um, and the reason why I thought that is because I'm not affected by how it affects me
Mhm.
anymore. But it does affect me. I just noticed that I'm not affected by it,
Right.
and and how it affects me is like go somewhere and I'll look at a shirt, for example, in a store, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a cool shirt, and I'll check it out, I'll pick it up, and my wife would be like, there's a lot of pink on that. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no, I didn't know that. She's like, yeah, it's pretty feminine. I'm like, all right, thanks for sharing with me.
Okay.
And when she's not there, I'll tell you another story that was pretty funny, actually. I was living in Salt Lake at the time with my good friend Mark McKeever and his family, and this was back in '96. We moved there one day. We left, I think, the morning of the flood in Ashland, and we were
Oh,
Mm.
unaware
wow.
of the flood, or the morning before. And we drove to Salt Lake. We got a place there, and we got a job with a painting company there. And I bought a pair of Carhartt painter pants, white pants, and I bought a red Quicksilver shirt that I thought was pretty cool. And I was like, all right. And so I washed them together and I
Mm.
dried them, and so the Carhartt pants came out faded, and I was like, hey, these are actually pretty nice. They're faded. And so I put them on the next morning, and my buddy Mark, who's wearing his white pants, he's walking out the door. He looks at me with a smirk on his face, and he knows I'm colorblind, but doesn't say a word.
Oh.
The fucker. And so he walks out the door. I'm like, what's with the smirk, And so I get to the paint store because I'm supposed to go to the paint store and order paint, and all these guys. This is like mid '90s.
Yes.
All these painter guys have these long hair mullets, and the guys at the
Yeah.
front counter, they're all, these backwood hick painter guys, and they're like looking at me like, the whole store is
In
quiet.
Utah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, guys, what the fuck? What's the deal here?
Yeah.
And the guy behind the counter, he's like, what's with the pink pants? And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, thank you. I'm colorblind. And
Oh
so
my
I need a pair
gosh.
of pants. You guys got some pants? And they're like, yeah, right there. I'm like, all right. So I bought a pair of pants, changed them right there.
That's
That is
hilarious.
Yeah,
hilarious. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. That is so
Mhm.
well, so I was just curious, because there's people who probably would love to talk to someone who's colorblind just to get their perspective, but don't feel comfortable asking those questions. So, but probably going through your regular life, it's not really a thing for you.
No, no, it's not too bad. Like I was in the store a couple of days ago asking somebody, what color is this? And they're like, looking at me. I always have to say I'm colorblind.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the fuck? You don't know what color this is,
Yeah.
And I always have to say I'm colorblind.
Yeah.
So if I say I'm colorblind, they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's blue. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, thanks. Is it purple? No, it's blue. I'm like, okay.
So I think that's a good
Yeah.
thing to note is if somebody asks for your help with the color of things in public somewhere, assume they might be colorblind and help just answer
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just tell them what color it is. What's the big
Yeah.
deal? You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's something to think about that people probably
Yeah.
don't totally
Yeah.
doesn't
Well,
equate.
I mean, with you
Yeah.
saying that, do you find like do people treat you weird like that, or are they more just taken back, like, hmm? But then they make
No.
sense of it.
Yeah, no, they just automatically, in my experience, um, just tell me what it is. They make no note of it, no judgment.
Yeah, yeah,
There might be some question at first, like, why are you asking me this question? What's really your agenda? You know? And then
Yeah.
when I tell them I'm colorblind, they're like, oh yeah, okay, it's blue. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
thanks. Then
Yeah.
we all move on. It's no big deal.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
to get back to where we were with the military school, so you have your graduation. Did your dad and your stepmom or your brother come to that?
Yeah. My stepmom and my mom's sister came to that, and um, and then I went home to Prineville the next day, and it was 2 or 3 days later I went to Ashland.
So did you know you were going to go to college in Ashland
Yeah.
ahead of time? Like, did they
Hmm.
tell you where you were going to go, or did
Yeah.
you pick
We
Did you pick
we
Southern
worked
Oregon
together
State?
on the process. I was
Okay.
hoping that we could, I could have a summer, and hang out with some friends and yeah, I don't know. I had always had this desire to, have a good experience with my family on in the farm and but it never was. And so, I went to Ashland and it was great. I'm glad I went somewhere where at least it was an experience where I was away from somebody who didn't want me to be there.
Yeah,
That's how it felt to me, whether they had that experience or not. That's how it felt.
of course.
And, and so, then I got to Ashland and, part of the reason of going to summer school, and this is granted to, to their benefit and, uh, not necessarily to their benefit, but to their argument, um, which is a good one. In order for me to get into the school, so they made me believe, I had to go to summer school and I had to get good grades in order to get in all the way to get full
Oh,
time into the fall. And
okay.
so I did take a few classes in summer school and I did do well, and they did admit me to full time
So you were
after
home
that.
for like 3 days, and
Yeah, I was
after
home for
being
like three
gone for
days.
4 years, you were home
Yeah,
for because in the summers for high school, did you come back to Oregon or did you stay in Georgia?
twice I came back to Oregon, and twice I stayed in Georgia. Every time I came home for Christmas, zero times I came home for spring break. Um, so I came home for Christmas every time, and 2 summers, and that was it.
And then that was it. And then so you
Yeah.
arrive in Ashland, Oregon, which is,
Hmm.
for our listeners, like a small Shakespearean town,
Yeah.
It's
artsy,
a college town.
beautiful college
Yeah.
town, but it has a beautiful Shakespearean festival. It's
Yeah.
in a valley. It's like 20 miles north of the California border. So of all the places to go, like kind of what you alluded to, is a beautiful town that had a lot to offer.
It was
I like to say
spectacular.
it's a magical place.
Yeah.
But you were there before all.
Well, when did you show up? Do you remember what summer it was? Like summer of
Yes.
'89?
Summer of '89. I
Yeah,
showed
okay.
up in, I think it was about early June. The first person I met before I even got it, I want to call them barracks, but they weren't barracks, they were dorms. It was Forest Hall, and
Mm,
which was the international dorm. And before I even got into Forest, I met Jim Mullenkop and his
Mm,
mom and his aunt. And they
okay.
were really sweet, really good people. And I'm like, oh, right on. And like, I have a friend, Jim was
yeah.
like, he was my buddy, before we even moved into the dorm. And I was like, right on. And so Jim and I hung out and and I just totally getting reacquainted into like civilian life, into regular clothes, and to, I didn't even know what kind of haircut I wanted because we had buzz cuts like every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And it's like the shoes that I had, everything was like given to me, like, you are wearing this, and this is what you're going to college with. And I
Yeah.
didn't have any money, I didn't have any taste, I didn't have any style. And here I am, like, in society, and here I am, like,
Not
okay,
just
this
society,
is
but
this is
Ashland's
me.
like a kaleidoscope of different people, not
Yeah,
necessarily demographically different, but you've got your hippies, your locals, the whole thing.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
exact
To be your own
opposite.
person.
It's the exact opposite of
It's
military
the
school.
antithesis of military school. It's a good way
Oh
to
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. It
Yeah.
was it was wild. And it took me some time, it took me some time to, come out of to figure out who I was, And
That
but
transition had to have been pretty intense.
it was intense.
Like, for your whole freshman year, were you pretty
Yeah.
much adjusting?
I got kicked out of the dorms my freshman year. I it was stupid. It's so basically, um I lived in this international dorm. Became friends with the whole Japanese crew. There
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, it was like 90% Japanese. I had a Japanese girlfriend. Um, I ended up getting a roommate that was Japanese. I had my own room for a while, which was awesome. And then I got a roommate. He was Japanese, and we were buddies. And we went to the Grateful Dead show. I think it was the summer of '89 with Little Feat.
Mm.
Um, Maybe it was '90. And he loved the Dead. He was like, he invited me to go to the Dead, and I didn't even know who the Dead was at the time, and still didn't after that. And I want to get into that later on when we talk about the Guam House. But um, and so basically, he was like a big hiker, climber kind of guy. He was a martial artist, really quiet and humble. And he had this camp stove, and he lit it, and then he separated the can from the stove, and then it's like gas got all over his arms and all over his shirt, and he caught on fire, and his
Oh
arms
my
caught on
god.
fire.
Oh my
And I put a
gosh.
towel over him, or he runs into the bathroom, and he throws the stove in the bathroom, and the whole bathroom catches on
This
fire.
is in the
The
dorms?
This is in the dorms, yeah.
Oh my
And the
god.
wall catches on fire,
Oh my
and
god.
so he gets the fire out on his arms and his and himself. I think he gets in the shower or something like that, and luckily he doesn't burn himself very well or very bad.
Oh
I don't
my
know
gosh.
how it didn't burn him, but it didn't. And so meanwhile the bathroom's on fire, and so I go out into the hall. I break the glass for the fire extinguisher. I get the fire extinguisher. I put the fire out, and so then the fire's out, and there was really very little damage, if any. I didn't even really assess the damage. I just put the fucking fire out.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
care. I was 18-year-old kid. I was just like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
And he was good, and then I have a story, like, hey guys, guess what
Yeah.
happened, and um and then I get called down to the administration of the dorms. Hey, Patrick, can you come down and talk to us about the bathroom incident? And I just ignored him. I'm like, oh, it'll be taken care of. I put the fire out, no big deal. And they called me, or they didn't call me, but they sent me more messages and more messages. If you don't come down, we're going to have to kick you out. And I just continued to ignore it. I don't know why I ignored it. I just did. And finally, I get this letter. You are now expelled from the dorms, and you cannot be here after this date. And I was like,
That's
oh, fuck,
crazy.
And I'm like, and so I went down there, and I'm like, can we renegotiate? And they're like, no. And I'm like, look, I put the fucking fire out. I saved your building here. I
Yeah.
figured you guys would, like, put it all together. And like, well, we still needed a report from you, and you failed to do that. I'm like, well, I'm doing it now. And they're like, well, it's too bad. You're out of here. And so I was like, all right.
So when was that?
That was
Like, halfway through freshman year?
yeah,
That
probably halfway
summer
through
probably.
freshman year.
Halfway through freshman year.
Yeah.
So then where
And
did you live?
then I got a an apartment down at the Lincoln Estates.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Where were
yeah.
those again?
Those were down past,
Down Lincoln Street, those big
yeah.
wooden apartments.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So
Kind of
yeah.
going towards like Tolman Creek Road that way?
No, no. Those
The other.
that's where the Ashlanders were. So it's over there kind of by the high school.
yeah.
Okay, that's right. Yeah,
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 Just full
yeah,
disclosure to our listeners, we didn't, clear this up, but we went to college with Pat. So as
yeah.
we're talking about
yeah.
things, that's why we know what he's talking about. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you move on your own? You were on your
Yeah,
own?
I got a 2 bedroom place, and a buddy of mine, no, I got a 1 bedroom place, and I think was paying like $245 a month,
Wow.
and I was just stoked to have my own place. Here I am,
Yeah.
like 18, 19 years
Yeah.
old, have my own place, and it was this dive,
Yeah.
right across the drive or the parking lot, which was like this, I don't know, couldn't have been any more than 40 feet, 30 feet, was the same apartment complex, but it was just across from me. There was this punk rock type of hangout there with Stefan and Claire, and they had parties every night, all night long, and black lights and punk music. And I'm like, I became friends
Yeah.
with them, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
wow, this at first they were intimidating, but now it's like, okay, wow, these are people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I became friends with them, and I had a buddy move in with me, and he slept in the living room. I had the bedroom, and
How are you
and
doing with your academics during that time once you got into college?
I was doing well until I got kicked out of the dorms, and then I dropped out of school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you dropped out of SOC.
yeah, and
Southern
that's
Oregon.
why.
When we went, it was
Hmm.
Southern Oregon State College. Now it's
Yeah,
considered Southern Oregon University. So you
right.
went there for the summer and took the
Hmm.
classes. You went for the first semester,
Hmm.
got
Hmm.
kicked out, and then dropped
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so did you um register again, or were you done at SOC after that?
I was done for a while. I went back and forth for a while, but I was done for a while. I worked, and I worked at various different places, and then I was doing some gardening one day at a friend's house for my friend's mom, and the painters were on site, and they're like, "There's a young, strong-looking lad. You want to help us paint?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." This was the two stiffs who need work,
I
and
remember that. Yeah, I
that
remember
was
that.
their name,
Yeah.
and Ken Conger and Dennis Wright, and so I was like, "Sure." And so they hired me on, taught me how to paint, and then I became a painter.
So
Yeah.
when we were in our sophomore year, were you going
Hmm.
to school at that time, or were you painting and working?
I was working and painting. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there were times I would go to school. I was kind of in and out of school for a while before I was not in school for a good while. And then I went back to school in 2009 for 3 years and finished up my degree. And I graduated in 2012.
Okay. So when we were all at SOC together, you were kind of in school and then out of school, in school and
I was
out of
just
school.
fucking around. Yeah. I was in and out of school trying to find myself, basically I was trying I grew up in this household where I couldn't be myself, and then I went to a military school, and then I'm out of military school, and I'm in Ashland. It's like I needed to find me, you
Yeah.
know,
You
Yeah.
and
needed a break,
I
really.
needed a break. Yeah.
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 Yeah, you're exactly right. And
It was
so,
it was a
when I
reprieve for you
yeah,
almost. Yeah.
and one of the things that I was always interested in life is what's going on behind the veil of everything that we see, feel, and hear. What's really going on? What is energy? What's religion? What's Christianity? What's going on? And I
Mhm.
remember, and this is where I'll bring in the Grateful Dead again. And when Sam asked me if I wanted to join you, Brian, and Chad Hooley to live in the Guam house, I was like, wow, here I am, this like I'm just coming out of kind of like just a very transitional time in my life of trying to find me, going to live with these people who I thought the world of. I'm just like, wow, you guys are like the coolest of the coolest. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to live there. And it was almost intimidating. And here I am, it's like one of the qualities about myself that I didn't like was I was a habitual liar. And and the reason why is because when I was with my family, it was my mom and dad. I felt like I had to lie to be safe, because getting in trouble by those guys was just a nightmare. And so that's what I did. And I didn't know how to be honest. And I remember praying to Jesus one night. I was like, Jesus, I knew Jesus was real. I knew Jesus was a part of my life. And I prayed to Jesus. I'm like, hey, man. And this was like early on, like right when I moved into the Guam house. And I cried myself to sleep that night because I wasn't comfortable with myself. And I was just like, I said, look, I want to know what's going on in life. I want to know what's going on behind the veil of everything that we see, feel, and hear. I want to know the deeper secrets in life. And I'll tell you what, I will show you truth if you show me truth. And from that point on, I was 100% honest on everything I said. And I remember like the first time I was tested, it was like you, Brian, and Eric Hansen, and there are some other people hanging around in the front room of the Guam house. And everybody was like just chilling and listening to the Grateful Dead. And I'm like, man, these guys are good. These guys they were like just touching my soul, the Grateful Dead. And I'm like, who are these guys? And everybody turned and looked at me. And Eric said, you don't know who this is? And I was like, and my first inclination was to lie, be like, yeah, I know who this is.
Mm,
But then I was like, no, stick to your word, stick to your prayer. I don't know why it's this,
yeah,
this activating, but at any rate, I was just like, no. And Eric was like, you really don't know who this is, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't. He was like, well, that's okay. It's the Grateful Dead. I'm like, oh, these guys are good. And then
yeah,
Brian was like, yeah, these guys are good, aren't they? I'm like, yeah, these guys are fucking awesome. And I felt safe, I felt,
accepted.
That's cool.
Yeah, because you
so,
because you were authentic,
yeah,
and you took the risk to be authentic, and and from what you knew of that, nothing good came of that. And so for you, it
right.
was took such courage
Yeah. It was such a
to
little thing,
no, it's not though. It's
but it
not.
was so big.
It's so big. It's so big
Yeah.
because you prayed about it. You had the integrity to follow through on what you had prayed on.
Yeah.
You took courage in that group of people that you were semi-intimidated to be with,
Yeah.
to be honest and say, and you knew they all knew what was going on,
Yeah.
and to be honest and say, "I don't know what this is. It's cool,
Yeah.
but I don't know." And that
Yeah.
takes a lot of courage to be that authentic.
Yeah.
And then as a result, you got acceptance.
Well, it's also your first step in a new life and a
Yeah,
new
for
path.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because then
It
that probably
was.
became you probably were authentic going forward.
Yeah, very much so, and everything I did, it was just like I realized that, I was honest with everything that I did and said from then on, and it was always rewarding. And I was like,
Yes.
wow, this is really cool, the results that you get from honesty. And at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like I made a deal with JC. I'm like, I wanted to know what was going on behind the veil of everything that we see, feel, and hear. I'm not going to just receive answers through my intuition on what's going on behind everything that we see, feel, and hear. But I researched, instead of going
Yeah.
to the school library to research my studies, I would research, well, what is intuition?
Mm,
What is energy? What is this chi stuff? What is that led me to yoga, led me to qigong, led me to meditation, led me down to astral this, that, and the other thing. And it led me to Qigong practices, led me to yogic practices. And then I was learning what I wanted to know,
It
about,
led you down such a
yeah,
authentic path because in order
yeah,
to fully, experience everything you just talked about, yoga, meditation,
right.
all of
Yeah,
that, you have to be
yeah.
authentic if you're really gonna have that experience. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
you followed this
yeah,
I mean, I think that moment was, the new road of your life,
yeah,
you know, that led you down that authentic road, and then you were searching for yourself. You were saying that in Ashland, you finally
yeah.
were free to
Hmm.
find yourself. I think that
Yeah,
moment is when you did.
yeah, yeah. I think so too.
And how cool, Brian, you were
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, no, that's wild.
yeah,
It is wild because I don't remember you as a religious person, and
yeah,
where how does that fit into your
yeah.
life
No,
now? Like, what the background, I guess, um, in asking God, right, for some clarity,
yeah,
and I had no clue that was happening.
yeah.
Um, how does that, I guess, fit into your life now, in a sense? With you've
What,
gone down this
spirituality?
path of yoga and self-discovery and energy and intuition. In some ways, that's counter to Christianity in some ways, isn't it? Or God, or I don't know if that
N
makes sense, but
I mean, I wouldn't say it's counter to it, but what's your
not counter,
experience?
but not directly aligned, maybe.
Some would say that. Others would say that they are a big part of each other and a missing link to Jesus Christ's teachings. Um, for reasons of, I won't talk about right now, but maybe for the purpose of control. But they yogis, my yogic path, Paramahansa Yogananda, who's a yogic master, there's many of them, and kind of once you get into that world, it really opens the doors to a lot of pretty crazy, amazing stuff. But at any rate, um, a lot of most yogic masters regard Jesus Christ as the guru of this planet.
Mm.
He is, and one of the things that Jesus said was, "You can do everything that I can and more." And when I don't, I'm not gonna like, pretend that I know exactly what happened, but as far as I'm aware of, what I was taught and what I resonate with, and I'm not saying this is factual information, but this is what I believe is when Jesus left, he left for some time. I don't know if it was years or whatever. Um, and, when he was young and he came back to, I don't know if he came back to Israel or whatever, wherever it was. Um, Supposedly he left and learned the yogic teachings, learned how to be one with God. Sure, he was already, you know, God in flesh and a master in himself, but maybe he had to go and figure out how to align himself to, to really harness that energy. And then once he did, he came back and maybe that's what he was teaching his disciples is how to become one with God. And that's what the yogic teachings is all about is how to unite our soul with God through utilizing our body, through utilizing yogic practices. And not only by utilizing yogic practices, but by utilizing, you know, um, our own efforts to, like the Ten Commandments. We call them the five yamas and the five niyamas. they're basically the same as the Ten Commandments, but, like, for example, non-harming. Once you master non-harming by thought, word, and action, by natural law, no harm can come your way. And, there's other abstentions and other things that, that you work on perfecting. And as you perfect them, then you are more aligned with God's presence, so to speak, in yourself. And, that's supposedly, as many yogis say, a part of Christianity.
That that
Paramahamsa
is so interesting.
Yogananda claims to be Christian. He wore a cross, and he was a yogic master. He performed miracles on a daily basis. He lived in the 50s. He was one who brought the yogic teachings to America, and pretty amazing guy. He wrote a book called Autobiography of a Yogi.
So he's the one who taught you?
No, he's one who I follow his path,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Jesus Christ is a part of his path.
That is so interesting. I didn't realize
Yeah.
I knew connection with
Hmm.
a higher power is huge in yoga and
Yeah.
all. I knew that. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was truly Jesus and God, like that it's stated like that. So that is
Yeah.
really that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's a lineage of gurus in the path that I'm a part of, and it's not an occult or anything like that. We're
Mm.
a community of people who you know do the practices to unfold God within ourselves,
Yes.
and 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 so that's basically what we do. And what Yogananda taught was a meditation practice called Kriya Yoga. And, it's a meditation practice that one of the things that I have observed with myself with Kriya is, each breath. Well, this is an interesting, there's so many things to say about Kriya, but I will say that it takes on average, according to the yogic perspective, and if I'm droning on too long, please let me know. We can change course.
No, this
But
is interesting.
yeah, okay. So it takes on average a soul, supposedly 1 million years of spiritual growth to reach oneness with God, and one Kriya breath can be equivalent to 1 year of spiritual growth. And a standard meditation is one round around the mala, 100 Kriya breaths. So if you do that twice a day, that's 216 breaths per day, 216 years of spiritual growth. And what happens with that, you should feel and see in your own mind, body, and spirit, and not just assume that, oh, I'm growing spiritually now because I'm doing Kriya every day. You want the tangible evidence.
Mhm.
And so, there was a time where, one of the things, and before I get into that, one of the things that Yogananda had stated is, one cell of your body can have is has the capability of powering the whole city of Chicago. And that's like a single cell of your body. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I don't know anybody who can do that, but that's pretty neat, and um and once I got to the point to where I was practicing, like, 273 seemed to be my number, 273 breaths in one meditation. And then, I would get to the place where I was meditating for like 3 hours at a time, and just super deep meditation,
Wow.
and to where it's like I wasn't even aware of all I had was awareness. And as I wasn't aware of my body, I wasn't aware of anything, just awareness. And it was like this 360-degree vision everywhere, and it's just complete stillness. And it was an incredible feeling. And the way that um I was as an individual, back in that time, and the way that I could use my body, and you know, and all the things that I did was really abnormally pretty incredible compared to what people normally do. And and so, that was cool. And
Did
I
you
I wouldn't try to be a show off or anything like that. You you have the energy of humility at the same time, but you also have an increase of energy, an increase of pranas, life force, so to speak. Uh
was this
and
when you were in Ashland
yeah, I
that
was
you
in
started
Ashland at
into
the
this?
time. This was around between 2003 to 2006
Okay,
is
so this
when I
is this is way after you met all of us
yeah, yeah,
and we all
yeah.
graduate. Okay, so
Yeah.
did you teach meditation
I
and yoga?
I ended up teaching, yeah, and I taught at one of the reasons why I wanted to practice yoga is because I wanted something to take my athletic performance to new levels of performance. Like I envisioned like I I wanted to be like a jumping spider, or I something like you just don't see people do. I
Mm,
wanted to have this explosive this explosive energy that's like so graceful that there's no energy used to be able to do it. And so I thought, well, yoga might take me there. And so I learned yoga, and I was really into mountain biking, and it just took my mountain biking into this crazy cool, new means of performance. And I was always like pushing my trying to push my abilities, and it was a really cool time in life. And then I developed my own practice of yoga to where, when you hold a certain pose for as long as you can comfortably, and always not push it, but with the intention of increasing the time for each yoga pose, you're increasing the amount of energy coming into you in that manner of that pose, at its maximum place of tension of using your body, if whether it be tension or balance or flexibility or what have you. And then you have this alignment of all these muscles running through the body. And when you can hold a pose for a good long time, then you have more of that alignment within your own muscles, and then you have this pranic flow through your whole body that you just feel like just pulsating with energy, like you feel like explosive but just graceful and just badass at the same time.
Like invincible.
And yeah, exactly. And I
How
would
long
experiment.
how long would you say on average you're holding the pose when you what you created?
Depends on the pose. I mean, it depends. Like, you know, um, like the side angle pose where you're on one hand on your side and the outside of one foot, like your left hand, your left foot, and your other hand is reaching towards the sky.
Mhm.
And I could hold that for days. Probably 100 deep breaths, long deep breaths.
So when you were teaching a class and you had your students go into that pose, how long
Yeah.
would you have them hold it?
Oh, as long as they could comfortably. It's all about where you are at the time.
Mhm.
Okay.
And, it's like you want to, if you can't come all the way into the pose, you want to come all the way into where you're perfect in that position. So if it's 25%, be 25%, but keep your body aligned how it's supposed to be aligned. And always give yourself enough time to come out gracefully. When you go into it, visualize yourself going into it, visualize yourself in it, and then do it, and then come in, hold. As soon as you feel a little jittery or shaky, then give yourself enough time to come out gracefully. That way you keep your mind and body connection just solid. And
You could
and
take that into so many aspects of life.
Yeah.
oh yeah, for sure.
That
And that
whole everything you just said right there.
mhm. Yeah. And
Makes me
then
want to get
you,
into yoga.
oh, it's
And I've
incredible.
dabbled so many times, but then I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, my knee hurts or my
You got to
elbow."
have the right teacher too. There's so
Yeah.
many
I've always
goofballs
done
out
it,
there.
like, off a YouTube video or something, right? Or some
Yeah.
off the
Yeah.
Roku or whatever it is,
Totally.
which is not the right approach, I don't think.
It can be if you find the right teacher off of
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
How long
Yeah.
did you teach?
I taught for about 5 years.
And was that all in Ashland?
It was, yeah.
So were
Yeah.
you doing that and painting? Were those
I was
like,
doing that and painting and going to school.
and then
So
you were going, so,
I was
so you were
back in
taking
school.
classes at SOC,
Yeah, I was married at the
painting.
time. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. So let's go back. So you live in the Guam house. That's when we all really hung out,
Yes.
knew each other
Yeah.
and everything,
Yeah.
right? Had
Yeah.
wonderful times.
Yeah, we sure did.
Um, went to dead shows.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories from any particular memories from going to shows?
Yes, I sure do. I was at a show. Um, I think it was with Allison Berliner, Brent Cook, and I can't recall if you were there or not, but I want to say you were. I can't imagine you guys not being there.
If there was a show, we
Um,
were there.
yeah. So, we were all there and we were in the front row to Jerry's right. We were to his left. I mean, we were left of him and right there in the front row. And I was just beside myself. I was just like, holy shit,
Yeah.
here we are. It's like, I didn't go to many dead shows, but I was like, damn, there's Jerry, there's Phil, there's all these guys, Mickey and I'm like watching them and I'm just in awe and I'm quiet, and I'm looking at him. And I remember making eye contact with Jerry a few times and Jerry would look at me and he would just be like, what's up with that kid, and I was looking at him like, dude, you're like freaking so amazing. And it was just incredible. It was really, really special.
I think
And
anytime someone makes eye contact with Jerry, it's a
yeah.
memory that's burned into their brain.
Oh, yeah.
When
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
saw you and you had that
Yeah.
connection with him, because I know you had that
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Do you know what
Hmm.
show that was
It was with,
or where it was?
oh, yeah, it was Autzen Stadium.
Oh, okay.
It might have been the Indigo Girls.
I'm trying to. Was Cracker one of the
No, if it
openers?
was Indigo Girls, that was their own opening. Cracker was like 93 or
Yeah,
92, something
yeah.
like
Okay,
that.
okay. I
Okay.
don't know if was that after 93?
No, because
No.
Indigo Girls had peaked by then. That was
Yeah.
probably I wasn't at that Autzen show personally, but that would have been because Little Feat I think was 89. Indigo Girls were probably summer of 90,
Okay, I was there
if
then.
I had to guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. There's
Yeah.
it's life changing. I always tell people that is
Yeah.
unless you went to a dead show, it's hard to explain.
Oh yeah, and the Little Feat show was incredible. It's like
Yeah.
that was the first time I experienced Little Feat, and I was like, wow, these guys are really good.
Yeah,
They're
they're
so
pretty good.
good. They're
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So we graduated and we left.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were still there working, going to
Mm-hmm.
school. And then when did you meet your wife?
I met my wife way later down the road. I did a lot of living before I met her for many years. Um, but I met her in 2006, I believe.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So
yeah.
during that time in Ashland, you stayed in Ashland that whole time, right?
No, mm-mm.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
what happened? Where'd you go?
yeah. So let me see here. I stayed in Ashland to about the year 2001. I painted, had my own business painting for a while, did some traveling, did a lot of mountain biking, snowboarding, yoga was my life. Uh, and, and then I moved out and I was a caretaker on a ranch for a 160-acre ranch out in Applegate, right on the Applegate River, with
Nice.
a beautiful view of um, God, what's that peak? Um,
Not Mount Baker, is it? Or are you thinking of a
no,
peak out there?
there's a peak out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is,
So
but
nice out there.
Sasquatch country. And oh yeah, it was beautiful. And this lady was super, super sweet. I was 30 years old. She was 50 and gorgeous and super sexy. And basically, I painted her house. It was a new construction house. She was divorcing her husband, and she basically just took me. And I was like, okay, you can take me. And and
Hmm.
she was back and forth from Napa Valley, and I was a caretaker of a ranch, so I was there by myself with my cat Gus, and whenever she came to town, it's like we had a great time, and
That's
uh,
awesome.
oh, it was beautiful, it was amazing, and here I am. I have these summers right on the Applegate River,
Hmm.
and
You've got a MILF?
I had a MILF. I had a MILF. She's super cool, man. She's really, really good lady. And she was really sweet and
How long did you
yeah.
do that for?
Uh probably a year and a half. Basically what happened was during that time, that's when I reconnected with my mom. And so I was kind of like in a nice secluded place during that time, and I was going through a lot of emotions. And also during that time, I found out my grandmother on my dad's side was dying of cancer, and she was, progressing with dementia. And I hadn't seen her since I was 6 years old, and I just remember her as just being this angel of love, just this wonderful, wonderful woman. And I was just like, I got to go down and see her. And so I went down and stayed with her. Ended up keeping.
Where was this where you
This was
went?
in Santa Cruz.
Okay.
So I lived in Santa Cruz for about a year and a half, 2 years, and I kept my place in Applegate at the same time. I was always, welcome there. I had my room there still, but I wasn't there. I was in Santa Cruz, and I painted houses down there, and I um, um, learned how to surf down there, and hung out with my grandma and my aunts and uncles and my cousins, and it was
And
pretty
were these
cool.
all on
Hmm?
your dad's side or mom's side, the
They're all
family?
on my dad's side. Yeah.
So you said you also reconnected with your mom because you hadn't seen your mom since you were 12,
Yeah, around then, 11, 12.
and now you're
Yeah.
30.
Yeah. So I'm
And
reconnecting with all these people.
so how did you get in touch with your mom?
Oh, so basically I had this like crazy inner drive that I had to find my mom. It was like this soul, like, just like, if you don't find your fucking mom, you're gonna die or something. It was really strange feeling. And and so I sought her out, and my her husband, they had their phone numbers unlisted, and it's really difficult to find. And I knew he worked at UPS, and so I called UPS, and I knew his first and last name. And so I ended up leaving my name and my telephone number for him to uh, either call me or have my mom call me. And so he ended up calling me, and he was just like, "Hey, Patrick, we've been waiting for this phone call for a long time." And I'm like, "Well, you didn't make it easy for me, but I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm glad that you feel this way." And he was like, "All right, well, I just wanted to call you and see how you're doing, and see what your intentions are." And I'm like, "Well, I can respect that." I said, "Well, I just had this calling to, find my mom, and I feel bad about how things were left, and I don't agree with how they left, and I'm sorry that we left that way, and I have no intentions other than just connecting with my mom." And
Mhm.
he was just like, "Oh, right on." And then she called me, and then I went to go see her and saw her a few times, and
How was that when you saw your mom for the first time in how many years?
18
18
years.
years?
it was uh it was sad. There's a lot of years missed. Last time she saw me was I was a little kid, and now I was an adult.
Yeah.
And, so she has this memory of me of being a little kid, and she missed all those years in between. And it's like, how do you identify with an adult, a grown man who was once your baby and you didn't see the progression there?
Yeah.
And, and to me, she's still my mom, but I saw how she was and I was just like, oh, okay.
So, was it sad for her or for you or for both?
It was, it was, there was some sadness there, but there was anger there, from her. I could tell, but she didn't express it. I just felt it.
Mhm.
And, there was, uh, I mean, regardless of, even though she knows why, I did and said what I said, I still said it,
Yeah.
and is, she has anger about that. And, she was glad to see me, it felt pretty kind of superficial, to be with her, but at the same time, it felt real and it felt like we connected and we were, you know, in repair of something that was fucked up for a long time.
Mhm.
And, I don't think that we could really, f- find the missing pieces to connect all the dots of the past, but, at least we knew that, she knew that I developed into a decent person, and I wanted her to know that, I just wanted her to see who I was, and I wanted to see her,
How many
so
times did you guys see each other?
not many. I mean, we're in contact, but um, we haven't seen each other that much. I think that I've probably seen her maybe. She came to my wedding, which was really cool.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. I probably saw her like 10 times,
So
you
when
know.
you were in Santa Cruz, was she in that area?
No, she was in Portland at the time.
Mm.
Okay, so you're spending
Yeah.
time with your dad's side of the family, reconnecting with them in Santa Cruz. And then
Hmm.
did you leave from Santa Cruz and go up to Portland when you saw her?
Actually, I went to Portland first and connected with her before I went to Santa Cruz.
So this was
And
like kind of a journey for you to kind of reconnect with family and with your past.
for sure, yeah.
And and this was when you were 30.
This was when I was 30, 30, 31, 32. Yeah.
Did that help you find some closure in a way to some past hurts?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of closure that took place for sure
Spending time with
with
seeing her and
family.
then spending time with your family.
Hmm.
So, after you said you spent about a year and a half there.
Hmm.
Where did you go after that?
Santa Cruz.
No, in Santa Cruz.
Oh, back to Ashland, actually.
So then you
Um,
went back to Ashland.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Back
what
to Ash. Hmm?
so what made you decide to come back to Ashland? Like, was it just that you had an established business there, or you just
It was
loved
just time
that?
for me to go home.
Okay.
Yeah. It's time for me to go home. Time for me. Santa Cruz wasn't my home, and Ashland was my home. And it was time for me to come home, time for me to start up life again there. And I did, and started painting again, got a house there. And
And is this
uh,
when you were also teaching yoga and meditation, or was that before you went to Santa Cruz?
no, that was after Santa Cruz and
Okay.
after a few years of moving back. So after I moved back, I ended up getting this house with a buddy of mine, and um, I was painting houses and was doing pretty well. Had a couple of crews actually. Was making pretty good money, and um, and I was hanging out with a crew of people. We were, just partying a lot and just just living, not. But at the same time, I was taking care of myself. I always did, and I was always mountain biking, eating well and doing yoga and going to the gym at the Y, and so I was always kind of like the outcast that way, but I hung with kind of like a metalhead crew, and we would go
Mhm.
see bands all the time and stuff, and go to parties, and that was kind of fun. And then I got like I then I went back to school, and I was starting to go back to school, and I met this yoga teacher, and I just felt really connected with her, and and she taught at the school, and I was like, you know anything about Kriya? And she's like, yeah. And I said, well, what do you know about it? And she's like, well, I teach at the Ananda Center. And she's like, why don't you come to the Ananda Center? And I'm like, all right. And so I came, and then I got like really, really into yoga again. And I kind of met my family, my yoga family, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then I got really steeped into it, and and into meditation. And that's when I got into, you know, then I finally, learned Kriya, and then just like yoga just took off for me. My whole life just blossomed in a amazing way, and
Did you keep the painting business while you were immersed in the yoga and the meditation?
I did, yeah. And then I got married, and I was still painting, and I was starting to have like weird health incidences too. Um, but that was more when I started school, but not while I got married. Um, but at any rate, I was still painting, and then I painted up until I had my son. And as soon as I had my son, I went back to school. And
Okay.
and
So I
so
have to ask, how was it, how did your life change when you became a father?
um, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. Yeah. I had, it's I remember when my wife was, she's putting on a little weight. She was thickening it up a little bit. And I was like, she's just becoming more sexy to me, and she's like, I'm gaining weight and I don't know what's going on. She's up to 130 pounds, and I'm like, okay, big deal, and she's like, and her friend was like, you're pregnant, girl. And and so I remember one day she went into the bathroom to take a pregnancy test, and she came out. She's like, oh, fuck. I'm like, what do you mean, oh, fuck? She's like, I'm pregnant. I'm
Hmm.
like, hey, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. It's like we just got married. I'm still painting. And, she's in her social work program. And I'm like, it's okay,
Mhm.
and we both had this feeling like, oh shit, like we tuned into the soul that we're bringing in, and we're like, this kid's going to be a fucking handful, and 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 then we had the feeling like everything's going to be okay,
Yeah,
and it is, everything is
yeah,
okay, and the kid is a fucking handful, but I love him to death, and I wouldn't trade him in for anybody else. I wouldn't want him to be any different.
yeah,
um he is who he is, and I love it. And it's he reminds me of myself. He reminds me of my dad. He reminds me of my wife. He reminds me of my wife's dad. And then he's himself on top of that.
Yeah.
He's a child of God. He's an amazing freaking kid.
yeah,
He's a freaking amazing kid, I should say.
yeah.
Um,
I always
so
say there's a emotion that you don't know exists until you become a parent, and it's a totally different love, and you only feel that once you become a parent, and you're like, "Oh, okay. I get it."
you know, I hear you, and I had that feeling, but at the same time, it's, growing up, I wasn't told I love you. I
Right.
didn't have affection in my life. It wasn't a thing. And so I was a little scared. I was concerned. I was like, wow, um, I thought, well, my wife was pregnant. I was like, I'm gonna have to force myself to tell my kid I love him because it's the right thing to do until it comes naturally. And these are the things that went through my mind, and And so I just, you know, there was no problem. There was
Yeah.
never a problem. And it was just, I love my kid. I tell him I love him every day. I give him a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and we're
It
solid.
probably it probably healed some things for you when they handed that baby to you.
Were you in the
Yeah.
delivery room? Were
Oh
you there?
yeah. Fuck
Yeah.
yeah. I was my wife, she was going through some major contractions and he had the cord wrapped around his neck, and
Mhm.
every time she had a contraction, his heart rate would go up, and I was just like, fuck. And so I was watching the monitor all night long, and it never went up and stayed up. Or no, the heart rate would go down,
Yeah.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the cord would
Yeah.
pull on his neck, and I was like, oh shit. It would drop down to 60, and I was like, fuck. But it wouldn't stay down. It would always come right back up. And finally, July 4th, 4th of July,
No kidding.
yeah,
Cool.
2009, if it was a boy, we were gonna name him Freedom. And and so it's like 4th of July, and I'm like, okay, maybe we shouldn't name him Freedom. That would be a little
Yeah.
bit.
We knew
And
some freedoms, right?
we
Didn't we
did,
know some
yeah, we
freedoms
sure
while
Yeah.
you were there?
did,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He
Yeah.
was a good guy. He ended up dying, by the
Yeah.
way. He had
Oh,
brain
Yeah.
cancer.
I
Yeah,
think I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He
yeah.
was a good guy. So he was born on the 4th of July.
I was there in the delivery room, and the birthing experience was rough. He came out blue.
Mm.
Again, I'm colorblind, so to me, he looked black or Mexican. And I'm
Mm.
thinking, all right, it's okay. We just got to get through this.
Yeah.
I have this baby that's not mine, and he's unconscious. And they bring him over to the respiratory table, and I'm like, they're giving him the respiratory thing, and I'm going over there, and he wasn't breathing. I just put my hand on him. I'm like, come on, buddy, come on, get back here. And I'm just like, I put my hand over him, and I'm just like trying to pull his spirit into his body, and he just like bursts out with this huge wail and cries, and I'm like, fuck yes.
That's
And they're like,
amazing.
okay, we're gonna take him back and check him out. And I'm like, you're not taking him anywhere. And so I pick him up.
It's an incredible
You're answering the
experience.
question I had for you, and it's, did you cry?
Yeah.
Right?
And I put him on my wife's belly, and she was just like, he already
Yeah.
had his eyes open. He was 2 weeks late. He was looking at her. She was looking at him.
Yeah.
It was crazy, man. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Brian cried
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's again, it's one of those things it's life
Yeah.
changing. It changes
Yeah.
who you are. You're not the same person you were
Yeah. No, you're not.
In a
until
matter of seconds,
Yeah.
in a matter of
really.
seconds.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just it's the best. Even though raising them can be so challenging, all of it
Fuck.
is just
So,
Yeah.
it's the best.
well, keep going.
That was it. What were
Well,
you gonna say?
I mean, I'm just thinking back. I mean, dude, you're in Ashland, you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
You go see your mom for the first time in 18 years, you reconnect,
Yeah.
right? And then you head to Santa Cruz for a
Yeah.
little while and meet your dad's family.
Yeah.
And then you roll back into Ashland, you get married, and
Yeah.
you have this miracle.
Yeah.
Your life just, I mean, that's a lot, right?
Fucking
That's a
A.
lot
Yeah.
considering your background and how fucked up some things were, right? Maybe
Yeah.
most, if not all things. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So you guys are then now a family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
We're a family now.
you're raising this baby and you
Yeah.
decided to go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you go back to school for?
Health and physical education. I wanted to go to school with the intention of getting into a medical program or a physical therapy program. And so, it ended up being either, acupuncture and Chinese medicine or PT. And I thought, well, PT is going to be more lucrative off the bat, but I have the calling for Chinese medicine. So I did Chinese medicine. And yeah.
I remember you doing that. I remember thinking, wow, that's really cool. Like
Yeah.
I was not in a position where I have an interest in all of that, but I
Yeah.
wasn't in a position, right? We're in a totally different thing going on. But I remember, man, that's pretty cool.
Did
Yeah,
you start
thanks.
practicing with it once you graduated with it?
Yeah, I mean, I did start practicing, and so I got my bachelor's, then my master's, then my doctorate, and so
What's your
what happened?
doctorate in?
Same,
Okay,
acupuncture and
so it's
Chinese
all
medicine.
Chinese medicine,
Yes,
acupuncture. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So if somebody asks you what you're a doctor of, you say acupuncture and Chinese medicine.
yes.
Okay.
It's a DAOM, Doctorate of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine.
Okay.
And so there's two Chinese medicine doctors. There's a DACM, there's a DAOM, the DA, and then there's the PhD. The DAOM is the best regarded, um, doctorate for Chinese medicine. The DACM is basically just for people who want to call themselves doctors, in my opinion.
Okay.
The DAOM is more of a clinical based doctorate program and research program. That's a 2 year full-time program.
How much schooling was that all together?
6 years full-time.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
of the master's and the doctorate.
wow.
Yeah,
So then did you open up your practice soon after you graduated?
I did. Yeah. I opened up a practice. We sold our house in Portland, and that was pretty cool experience alone. Just that whole remodel of that house and selling that, getting ourselves into a better house, bigger house here in Bend in a amazing neighborhood that's walking distance from the river and the river trail.
Well, wait,
And
real quick. So
sure,
you left Ashland and went up you the three of you left Ashland
yeah,
and went up to Portland. Was that
right.
for you to go to school up there?
It was,
Were-
yes.
And were you
Okay.
And
at Portland State or a separate
Oregon College of
school?
Oriental Medicine.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after you finished that, you sold your house in
moved to
Portland
Bend. Yeah,
and moved to Bend. And that's
yeah,
where your practice is currently.
For listeners or
correct.
watchers, really, that behind you is Riverbend Park in Bend, Oregon, and it is live in action.
It
Yes,
is.
this isn't a green screen. If
This
you're
isn't a
watching
green
on
screen.
YouTube, this is actually what Bend, Oregon looks like.
And for the record, there's been, I think, at least 2 people have jumped off that bridge into the
Yes.
water since we've been.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, it's actually
It
that
could be my
beautiful
kid. He jumps off it in the summertime on the weekends.
So
Yeah.
why how would you describe to people what Oriental medicine is? What's the concept behind it?
Yeah, Oriental medicine, the concept is finding balance within the body. It's a big question, and it requires an answer that usually takes some uh, choreography before you answer the question, if that makes any sense. But um, but it's about basically harmonizing the body, harmonizing the mind, body, and spirit. Um, and then you can take it to, you can specialize in different aspects of Chinese medicine, like allopathic medicine specializes in allopathic medicine or in different parts of allopathic medicine. Like neurology or hand foot doctor or optometrist, ophthalmologist, whatever. And so my specialty is um, helping people recover from chronic illness. Basically, bottom line, neurological disease, autoimmune disease, cancers, um, and any type of unnamed chronic illness. Um,
Like
that's what I do.
autoimmune?
Yeah, autoimmune.
So how do you go about doing that? Like I know I'm sure that's a loaded question, but for the layman,
Yeah.
how do you
Well,
go about finding the cause?
well, it's it's so basically you understand what you got to understand what the immune system does when we talk about autoimmune. What does the immune system do? It kind of helps keep, one of the things that it does is it helps keep microbes under control in the body, right? And environmental toxins. And body chronically fires with immune reactions, such as intermittent episodes of inflammation, flares, skin rashes, um, you know, joint pain, roaming joint pains, inflammation of the brain, such as brain fog, short-term memory loss. You can have other immune-like reactions, such as numbness and tingling in the extremities, arms, face, head, anywhere in the body, feet, legs. You can have other immune reactions such as fevers. They call it an interleukin 10 response. Inflammation, I believe, is an interleukin 6 response. You have, um, you have inflammation in other areas, like you might have urinary retention, where when you go to urinate at times, the flow is a little bit slower than you think that it should. Then you go to see a urologist. What does a urologist do? They find antibodies that go after the tissues in the ureter or whatever, and they diagnose you with RA, and they give you immune suppressants. They suppress the immune system rather than help the immune system. So, you recognize that autoimmune disease, you have the immune system is chronically firing. And so then you're like, okay, why is the immune system chronically firing? Then if you're automatically aware of infectious disease, which I am because I had been through it, I have my own story. Then you think, okay, is this bugs or is this environmental toxins? Bugs meaning, is this a bacterial, yeast, fungus, mold, parasitic, protozoa infection, viral infection, or is it what's referred to as MSIDS, multiple systemic infectious disease syndrome? Usually it's the latter. Allopathic doctors, they will find, okay, you have inflammation, let's treat it as if you have fibromyalgia. Okay, we'll give you this medication to suppress the immune system so you have less symptoms. You can feel better temporarily. Or let's say you have hip pain. You come in with, crazy debilitating hip pain. You realize that your TNF alpha and your rheumatoid factors are elevated, and you have RA. Okay, so we'll just give you some immune suppressants. So the hip pain will become like Humira, and the hip pain will be less, but then other areas of the body start showing up with other weird things. You might start to have cardiovascular issues. You might start to have pulmonary issues. You might start to have neurological issues or what have you. Because when you suppress the immune system, if you have a chronic infection, then the chronic infection proliferates at a faster rate. And when it proliferates, it infects different areas of the body and starts to present in different areas of the body. And then if you keep going through the allopathic process, then you're just provided more medications to help manage these other places of challenges. Whereas if you know how to find the root cause, then there's a doctor by the name of Dr. Richard Horowitz. He's a medical doctor. He has a PhD, and he has tested over 13,000 people now with different pathogens, and he's categorized uh, symptoms, the patient's symptoms associated with their positive diagnostics of their pathogenic laboratory presentation, and uh, and so you can figure out what type of infection people are working with based on um, their symptom presentation. And a lot of times there is crossover, but if there's crossover, then you just go through and you ask questions regarding their demographics. Where have they lived? Did they travel? Did they get sick when they travel? What kind of sickness did they have? What were their symptoms? What happened from there? It's like when I meet with somebody and they have autoimmune disease, I get a whole list of their symptoms. And after they tell me everything that's going on, then I go down my own list and we add about a ton more symptoms to the list because they can't remember all of them. They were like, oh, yeah, I do have that, that, and that, and that. And so then we have this running list of 50 to 80 symptoms. And then I go through their demographics. I want to know the health of their mom when they were born and when they were children. I want to know where they lived, where they traveled, um, how their health was throughout their life. And that gives me a picture of what their exposure was and how things led up to where they are now. And that gives me an image, or that gives me an understanding of their pathogenic load. We all have one. And it gives me an understanding of what types of infections that they're working with. And it gives me an understanding on, if they're taking medications, if what I'm working with in regards to treating them. If we both resonate with each other for treatment. And and so that's how I figure out what people are working with in terms of autoimmune disease. I do rule out environmental toxicity. Sometimes people do have environmental toxicity, but it's generally, actually always in my case, not alone environmental toxicity causing symptoms of autoimmune disease. And autoimmune is a lot of times considered the immune system going haywire. There's just a genetic default that trips at some point in life, and you have this autoimmune presentation, and you're fucked, and this is the way it's going to be for the rest of your life. That's
That
bullshit.
seems to be the commentary, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
is, and that's
yeah.
fucking BS. And uh, and
Just live with
this,
it.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that's our weak genes. This is what our ancestors have, so this is what I'm going to have. Bullshit. First of all, we're susceptible to anything and everything. Secondly, yeah, we are handed down these genes from our ancestors, but they need to get triggered. And what triggers them? Either excess environmental toxin or an elevated pathogenic load. If these weak genes get triggered, and then we present with these gene mutations and or disease manifestations, clean up the infection, and the gene repairs itself, the symptoms decrease, and people go into remission.
So how do you clean up an infection?
How do you clean up an infection? It's basically how I do it is, it depends on the infection. And but when people have chronic illness, like debilitating chronic illness, and they've seen tons of different doctors, and let's say they're not on medications to where where you can't help them, because if they're on some medications, you just can't help them, because no matter what you do or what you take, the neurotransmitters in the body, and they just won't let you detox. So they have to get off certain meds first, and some of them are benzodiazepines,
Mm.
mental health drugs.
Mhm.
And mental health issues like bipolar disorder, um, and schizophrenia are caused by chronic infections, inflammation of the brain, inflammation of the brainstem. And, it's, and so what the benzos do is they suppress the immune system in those areas. Um, and so you get the person off the drugs first. And then what you do is you have to understand how these infections proliferate and why people have symptoms, and why people have flares. So what happens is with a chronic infection is, I'm answering your question, but it's it's kind of like a thorough answer, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So because there is not just a one word answer to it.
Right.
Um, so you have to understand, what causes symptoms. And what causes symptoms is, one, the excess pathogenic load, that the body's immune system identifies that there's something wrong in the body, so it's creating inflammation. And if it's global inflammation, then you know, then the microbial load is everywhere. If it's inflammation in the joints, then you have an infection in the joints. If it's brain fog, short-term memory loss, there's different avenues of why that might happen. But long story short, what causes these to happen is increased motility of the infection, causing the immune system to target that area. And when it targets that area, people have increased symptoms. And at the same time, the immune system increases the histamine load. And when people have an increased histamine load, which is a byproduct of increasing inflammation, then people have uh, chronic sinusitis, they have skin rashes, and they have lack of sleep. And that's classic elevated histamine response, um, or sneezing fits.
I do have a
Uh,
question.
sure.
When you use the term infection,
Hmm.
I think of, I don't know, like I got a cut, I didn't treat it right, and now it's like getting all pussy and gross, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is that I have knee pain every now and then,
Yeah.
and it's kind of in the joint. How would
Hmm.
you define that or differentiate that infection, if that's what this would be, versus
Yeah.
the one that we all think of as in the cut? That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, it could be something more chronic. It could be. So what happens is, and I'm not saying that this is an infection, that you have, chronic intermittent knee
Yeah,
pain,
yeah.
but what I would do is I would ask you, do you have this? I would go down the list of symptoms and ask you if you have anything else going on. All right, I always ask you first if you have anything else going on. And then after you tell me everything that you have going on, I would ask you more questions. And if I find that you do have more things going on that are immune related reactions, and you didn't have an injury to that knee, then I might say, well, you have this, this, and this. You have roaming joint pains, you have some calf cramping, you have some intermittent episodes of night sweats. Um, you have food sensitivities to sugars and alcohol. So it could, your knee pain could be related to a chronic infection. And if it is, we'll know.
Yeah,
And
okay.
we'll know by how you respond to treatment.
Yeah, I think mine's more directly related to uh the way I sit. So I don't think it's infection. That's why I was
Oh,
curious of
yeah.
the, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think it's my body attacking itself
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
if there's swelling too, there that could be indication
Mhm.
of something going on, but it doesn't have to be.
But
But
that, and I asked the question because I do think for our listeners, this is
mhm,
fascinating. I'm fascinated with it in
mhm,
terms of the, if all things are normal and all of a
mhm.
sudden my knee starts to hurt, there's,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I think you're going more so than a direct, I banged it against the corner of the hall or something like that.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
cause
I
and
mean,
effect.
I would ask you that first, did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
bang
yeah.
it? Did you injure it?
Yeah,
What's going on? And but I like to rule everything out before I consider infection.
yeah,
And because I don't want people to have, uh, you know, I don't want to have them deal with cleaning up a chronic infection. It's a process. It's for a lot of people it sucks. I have a new patient recently who loves it. She's just like, I love your treatment. This is amazing. And it's like it makes so much sense. And it's like I've been so sick for so long. I love this diet and I love everything about it. I'm like, fucking right on, man.
I
You're
was gonna ask
easy.
you that. Do you
Yeah.
find you're the first stop or the last stop?
Usually the last.
Yeah,
I was the first for her, but that's a first for me.
yeah,
But usually the last. Um, but so what increases symptoms? Pathogenic, when the pathogenic motility is increased. How does the pathogenic motility get increased? The motility of the infection itself. So it gets increased by a number of things. One, stress will do it. When you have a significant amount of stress or trauma, it weakens the immune system. When the immune system is weak, the bugs sense this in the body. They increase their motility. When they increase their motility, they're releasing antigen, which is waste material, which interacts with our neurological systems. Our neurological systems, and then we have more symptoms. Plus, when the pathogen increases its motility, the immune system turns back on, it senses this, and then it it responds in a hyper mode, and then we have an increased immune flare. So that's why when I treat people, I'm like, one thing you got to do is you got to keep your emotions under control. If you get, if you have a tendency to get pissed, save it for later. If you have a tendency to get sad, save it for later, because you want to keep steady until we get your infection load under control. Then get pissed all you want, but until then, keep steady. Um, and then, what else? Physical stress. You want to keep the four stressors under control. So, mental, physical, emotional, environmental. So emotional stress, physical stress, if you have a chronic infection and you're down and you're in a hard way, if you think that exercise is your answer, that's wrong. When you exercise, our muscles are like sponges. They're going to be, if we have a chronic infection, we're just going to be squeezing out pathogen into the lymphatic system, into the bloodstream. It's going to be circulating around the body, and then we're going to have a flare. I had flares when I did just very small amounts of exercise that hospitalized me. And I almost lost my life to it. And I realized that it was exercise, and the doctors were like, oh, no, that had nothing to do with it. I'm like, yes, it did have something to do with it, but I don't know why it had something to do with it. So I tell people not to exercise. And people do realize a lot of times that they have exercise sensitivity. And so then you have, keep your mental stress under control, which is, just don't think too much, don't read too much, don't study too much, don't exercise your brain too much. Otherwise, you're just going to spin yourself into an anxiety attack.
So with
And
that though, that's a tough one, right? Where
can
like,
be.
I'm in
Yeah.
the same camp as you. I just compartmentalized it in many ways.
Hmm.
Gen X, it's like bury that shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from a clinical perspective, would you and you go back to your yogi days,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
you know, is it breathing? Is it meditation? That I assume those all the above, maybe, if it's not stressful to you.
You know what? I just I educate people about that, and I leave it up to them to harness it. And then there are some times where we have to revisit it and talk about it. But I did have a meditation class that I presented for my patients for a while, and
Mhm.
it was helpful for them. And I think it is a missing link that I think that could be really helpful for the treatment process.
I
Is
think absolutely, because
and
what
daily.
you just described mentally,
Mhm.
that's so hard. Like, I think a tool for people to calm their brain
Right.
and to not overthink, not
Right.
overanalyze, not overworry, especially if you're a
Yeah.
parent.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, that I think that's a huge tool to learn to
Mhm.
be like, "Okay," and then
Mhm.
kinda flip that on, like,
Mhm.
clean your mind, clear
Yeah.
your mind, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has to be one of the most challenging out of the 4. I
Turning
would
off
think.
your
Yeah.
Turning off your
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah. People
Yeah.
are really, really into it. And I really like talk to people about this. I'm just like, look, you're going to have symptoms going through this. You're going to have, things are going to be up and down. You're just going to have to understand that, you know, things are going to be a little bit of a whirlwind until you feel better, and just let it go. Check in with yourself every month instead of every day. Let things be. Check in at the end of the month. When I treat people, I give them my cell phone number. I said, hey, look, contact me if you have any questions regarding anything, any questions regarding dietary modifications, supplement modifications. I want all your questions answered, because when I meet you 5 weeks from now, I want to see you better.
Mhm.
And every time I meet somebody, most times every 5 weeks, they're better. And
How do
so
you
that's
change diet?
Well, so basically, the fourth stressor to keep under control is environmental stress. Obvious stuff, stay away from mold, and, um, you know, be aware of household chemicals, because you'll respond to bleaches, cleaners, negatively, and things like that. Dietary modifications, you basically got to know what feeds infections. So when you feed the infection, the infection increases motility. When it increases motility, the immune system is going to respond to that. When the immune system responds, you're going to have immune reactions such as inflammation, intermittent fevers, numbness and tingling, all kinds of, weird things that can be associated with inflammation, such as, uh, all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
Right.
so you don't want to feed the bugs. And so what happens is, and we'll get into the diet in a second, but what happens is when you feed the bugs, when you feed the infection gets excited. I went through the process of just telling you what happens when the infection gets excited. So when you don't feed the infection and you really get this dialed in and you figure it out. And I have this all figured out because I had to. I was like, either I had to or I'd be dead. And so I had to figure it out. And then this was part of my doctorate thesis. And part of my doctorate thesis was, this whole thing, but I had access to the medical database, the medical database where you could research anything and everything. People say there's no research on herbs. There are millions of research studies on herbs and some badass studies. And so, I did my research on foods. Part of my research was on certain biochemical properties that feed infections. I wanted to verify that lactose, alpha galactose, fructose, sucrose, mucilage fed infections. And I found that they all did. And so, as well as yeast. And so if you keep sucrose, fructose, alpha galactose, mucilage, and lactose out of the diet, you don't feed the infection, then what happens is the first 2 or 3 weeks, the chronic infection is going to get more motile. It's going to get hungry. It's going to get stressed out. It's going to get anxious. And then the immune system is going to respond to that. And we're going to have increased immune reactions. And then people are going to be more anxious. And they're going to have all these, crazy cravings of like, well, maybe I can eat pickles, but you can't eat pickles because vinegar feeds bugs. And so, but they text me, can I eat pickles? Like, is it in
Oh, so
apple cider vinegar? No, it's in rice wine vinegar. Then no, you can't. Okay. And so once you, once the infection gets tired after 2 to 3 weeks, it increases its motility and it gets stressed and then you get stressed. But after 2 or 3 weeks, then the motility just stops. And when it stops, then people's symptoms just drop. And they don't drop fully, but they drop a lot. Sometimes they drop within a week, sometimes within 2 weeks, sometimes it takes 2 months. But generally, people's symptoms, after you don't feed the bugs for a certain amount of time, symptoms just drop. And so then what you do, go ahead, Brian, you had a
I
question?
know I'm fascinated because I can relate to this at a carb level
Yeah.
for my own self. But
Yeah.
right, so I love carbs. We all love carbs.
Sure.
But I find that when I don't eat carbs for the most part. I'm
Hmm.
not that I'm carb free, but my carbs are chosen wisely. It's fruits and
Yeah.
berries and whole,
Nice.
not refined wheats and pizza and stuff like that. But I do
Awesome.
find that to get out of that, you're breaking a cycle, and
Oh
that
yeah.
cycle sucks, that
Yeah,
withdrawal. So
totally.
I'm thinking of it for you treating someone. You've got to get them through that period, and you
Oh
touched
yeah.
where it can be anywhere from a week or two, probably 2 weeks. I think it was your initial starting point, but it could even go longer.
It
So,
could. Yeah.
right, they're having a struggle to get through that because it's like you dropped your carb load or you stop feeding the bug.
Mhm.
Bug gets
Mhm.
hungry and
Mhm.
starts kind of lashing out, I guess, in a sense, crying
Yeah.
for more.
Yeah.
Yeah, feed me, feed me. If you can get past it, you can reach some level of calm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to hear you describe it that way. I can relate to it at a dietary carb level,
It's almost like
Yeah.
you're breaking the addiction of
breaking a
the
cycle.
bug.
Yeah.
The bug is addicted to
For
to
sure. They're the
being
ones sending chemical messages to our
yes,
brain, telling us what they want, making us think that that's what we want.
Have you
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
have you treated, um, I'll use a less harsh term, folks with drinking issues or addiction issues at all? Because it's sort of that same cycle, right? If you're drinking and you can maybe get away for a little while, but then once you start drinking, you're back on the wagon, right? I'm off the wagon, I'm on that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh, it's very similar thing. Drinking leads to more drinking.
for
Have you,
sure.
do you have patients like that at all, or have you not really
I
gotten
have
into that area?
not had patients with that type of addiction. I've had patients with pharmaceutical dependency that I
Yeah.
had helped them break from.
The benzos.
Yeah, benzos and immune suppressants.
How do you deal with a
Yeah.
person with benzo? I think benzos are the source of a lot of evil in the world. A
They're
lot of
bad.
bad things have happened.
They are used, they are researched, and they're trials and clinical trials before they're used on how people respond to them. But they're, as far as I know, and I'm not going to say that this is a fact, but this is my understanding, that there are limited, if any, clinical trials on getting people off of these medications.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
And
yeah.
so getting them off can be very difficult. Um,
Are they
and
highly addictive that you know of,
they
or create
aren't
a severe
necessarily
dependence?
addictive, but if you don't have them, the body can suffer.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's an addiction component. It's not like I need this, but it's more
Yeah.
like if I don't take this, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
very psychological
Oh, very
sensation, I think.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what's
Yeah.
scary is that they're given to children or,
Well, a lot of the
minors.
mass shootings you've seen, also, this is probably bold to offend people, but a lot of them have been on benzos.
All of
Yeah.
them, I
All of
believe.
them, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
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 I think
Yeah.
that's a whole nother thing, but I agree. I think that
Mhm.
it's destroyed our children in so many ways that have been put on that because it kills your dopamine,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's part of it. And a lot of these, and we're kind of getting, onto a different topic, and I'm happy to do it. And but I do want to touch on this is, here we are talking about, people going mad, people going crazy, people
Yeah.
shooting people killing themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether they are on benzos or not, they have a mental illness. And man, when people have a mental illness, more times than not, this is a chronic infection.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
they are not identified as having a chronic infection ever. Sorry, I'm punching the
No,
computer again.
no, I'm glad you
Um,
brought it back to that, because
Yeah.
I think where what I heard at least is that
mhm,
the way we're treating infection
mhm,
and illness, whatever,
mhm.
is through uh, suppression.
Yeah,
The strategy is suppression. So
right.
the opposite of that feels like a buildup. And is that
Oh, yeah,
kind of where you're at? I would assume, right? I'm not saying you're anti-suppression. You've just acknowledged that's the normal treatment in Western medicine, I think.
exactly. Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, the Oriental medicine and maybe your own approach is it to build up the immune system, to facilitate strengthening it rather than suppressing it
Well,
or controlling it?
you want the immune system working, and you don't want it being suppressed. But no, that's partially that's my approach. Yes, my other approach is, um, you know, I I uh, I kill bugs.
Yeah. I was
That's
just
what I
gonna
do.
say he kills the
Um,
bugs. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Have you helped people with depression?
Oh, absolutely,
And
definitely.
how long has it usually taken them to see their symptoms
Oh,
disappear? Is it that
it all depends on the person. Sometime within a month, sometime within 2 or 3 months. But anybody who has had chronic depression, they also have chronic anxiety
Mm,
and or panic attacks, and they have other autoimmune related symptoms, and they probably have a diagnosis, whether it be polymyalgia rheumatica or fibromyalgia or MS or what have you. And um, yeah, I get those people cleaned up and their depression's gone.
What is your outlook, or your opinion on parasites?
Oh, I mean, parasites are everywhere. They basically, um, microbes are the cause of degeneration. As people age, their microbial load, their pathogenic load, their bad microbes, they they just increase naturally over time. It's the cause of degeneration. It's the cause of, internal problems, and it's what kills us more times than not. So, we have parasites, we have bacteria, we have protozoa, we have yeast, fungus, and mold. Parasites is just one of them. And, there are microscopic roundworms that get into the tissues of the body. If you were to take an elder, or just somebody who's lived a stressful life, or somebody who's an outdoors person who's outdoors all the time and they don't have a very robust immune system, they don't have much German blood in them. People who are German, they're extremely resilient, by the way. And but people not, you can take a slice of their tissue, look at it under a microscope, and you're going to see microbes. You're going to see potentially microscopic roundworms, bacteria, yeast, fungus, mold, whatever. Um,
Is what you do, is part of it killing the parasites?
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay, so when you say
yeah,
bugs, in there is parasites.
for sure, yeah.
Okay.
And the
So
way
yeah,
you the way you're saying you kill them is by starving them, right?
that's
Don't
part
feed
of
them.
it. Yeah, that's
Okay.
part of it. So part of it is so you can there's a lot of bugs like spirochetes, a lot of different types of spirochetes that can and a lot of other types of microbes, bacteria that can create little microcysts, and they can proliferate and multiply without feeding on the body or without feeding off of what you feed them for up to 8 months at a time. And so they can
Wow.
grow their pathogenic load without feeding on the body and reproduce
How do you
asexually
how do you get rid of those?
with herbs, oils, and eventually, when people are symptom free, like robust cyst breakers, biofilm dissolvers, things like this. The cyst breakers and the biofilm dissolvers that people get on Amazon and all these, NDs use and stuff like that, you know, they're uh, they're wimpy compared to what Chinese medicine can do if you know how to use Chinese medicine to use this. And but yeah, with Chinese medicine, like for example, when I was really, really sick, I was debilitated for a good, year and a half. And, I couldn't walk any more than 20 feet at a time. I couldn't carry on a conversation without remembering what I was talking about. I had basically every symptom in the book. I was a mess. And, but I had this, when I was getting cleaned up, when I finally figured it out after spending a good, $80,000 on trying to figure out what the cause of my situation was, I found out at school. I had a class in it my senior year. And I'm like, fucking A. So this is the cause of chronic illness. Nobody was listening in class. Everybody was on their computers, on Amazon looking at their new bathing suits that they were going to wear for Christmas break. And I'm like, guys, this is it. This is it right here. And I went home and I celebrated. I told my wife, I'm like, I finally figured out what was going on with me. And she's like, what's that? She's like, I have chronic infections. She's like, oh, well, what are you going to do about that? I'm like, don't worry about it. I got this. Anyway, so I'm a, you know, 7 months through my treatment, and I still feel this burning type of cystic formation in my lower right quadrant of my abdomen, where there was a cyst that was picked up on CT scan at one time, and and so I talked to one of my colleagues, one of my professors, who's a good friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I feel like I'm getting through this, but I've still got this cyst in my lower right quadrant. I feel, and I just can't seem to get it." And he's like, "All right, well, we'll see if we can break it open." I'm like, "All right." So he gives me this formula with a bunch of sticks and twigs and thorns and beetles and scorpions, centipedes, And he was like, so, you know, do this slow. And this guy doses big. He's a PhD. He's worked in, he had a clinic in China for, 10 years. He's American, speaks fluent Chinese, and, but total scholar, just badass. And, so he doses big already. And he tells me to be careful. And he was like, just take 25% of this formula. I'm like, all right. So I took half of the formula and drank it. And I felt that pressure and that cyst open up within 15 minutes. And immediately I had like serious like immune reactions. I got a fever, got sweats, got chills, got anxious, got rapid heart rate. I was like, all right,
You're
these
gonna
motherfuckers
die.
are going down. And so no, I was like, okay, I'm gonna kill these, these bastards that are coming out of the cyst. And so then I took a bunch of oils, the doTERRA, clove, oregano, cassia, and a few drops of peppermint, and probably took about 100 drops of essential oils and some olive oil, downed it, and within 15 minutes, all my immune reactions dropped, but I felt super fatigued, and I was like, whoa, sweet, I got the
Wow.
fuckers. And so then I was just like, all right, we did it. And then I went to my son's baseball game and just put on some shades and soaked up the sun and celebrated and took that formula for the next 30 days to make sure I got that and everything else. And then I was done.
So what were you diagnosed with
I
by
was
the
diagnosed
medical?
with Crohn's and MS.
So they diagnosed you with Crohn's and MS,
Yes.
and then you healed yourself through Oriental medicine, not through the Western medicine.
Yeah, modified Oriental medicine,
Didn't for a
definitely.
while, didn't you think you had Lyme's?
Well, I mean, if you have Lyme, you have that's just one infection.
Yeah.
Lyme disease is based off different species of Borrelia burgdorferi. That's a spirochete. And so when people have chronic illness these days, they think, well, maybe it's Lyme disease. And so they get tested for Lyme. And because they test negative, whether they have it or not, you're more likely to test negative even if you have it. Then doctors will say, okay, well, you don't have Lyme disease, so we'll just put you on immune suppressants. You don't have an infection. Just because you test negative for Lyme disease doesn't mean you don't have another infection.
Yeah.
It's like there's a fucking billion jillion microbes out there in the world. It's like, so yeah, I mean, I probably had some Lyme in there, but I know I had Bartonella, Babesia. Uh, I don't know if I had some spirochete infections. Probably did based on my lifestyle. Um, but probably some parasites. Um, but mostly Bartonella, Babesia type of presentation is what I had.
And how long did it take you to heal yourself? How long was your healing journey?
8 months.
And did you know it was succeeding after the first month, that you were on the right track?
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be something that you want to then go scream from the rooftops. You must feel crazy sometimes because you know the answer and you're watching everyone chase their healing journey down the wrong path.
Yeah. It's a weird, this world is a weird place right now. And, it is what it is, but on one hand, I feel like I have to be careful, I have to be careful you know, how I educate people. It's like I treat people who come to me, but do I want to put my message out there? If I do, is it stepping on the toes of big pharma? Um, am I educating if I become big enough with my education, or am I going to disappear or be sold on the black market for, you know, uh, the dark web for uh, torture or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just,
It's like you know the secret and they
yeah.
don't. Because what is your opinion on Western medicine?
I mean, I think that, doctors, their hands are tied. They have to abide by protocols, and if they don't, then they get in trouble. So doctors can't necessarily treat how they want to treat. Hospitals have protocols, doctors have protocols. NDs and Chinese medicine doctors, they don't have protocols. They have to stay in their lane, but they don't have protocols. Um, Western allopathic medicine, they hold the authority of medicine. So because they are authority, they can do what they have to do what they're told to do. And it's a wild world out there with
Big
allopathic
business.
medicine. On one hand, allopathic medicine is very helpful in a lot of ways. It's amazing the technology they have and their capabilities, um, and the stuff that they have, and pharmaceutical companies. I think that they have some amazing things, um, I think that it's really good that we have them. However, I do think that at times they take advantage of, um, situations um, for profit.
What do
Yeah.
you think
And
about like Advil? Are you taking Advil?
yeah, I recommend Advil. I recommend Advil and Tylenol.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, for people. I don't, if people have stomach issues, there's a lot of, question about Advil causing ulcers. If Advil is an immune suppressant, it's going to suppress the immune system temporarily. It's going to reduce inflammation. Obviously, that's immune suppressive, and so if you develop ulcers in the stomach by taking Advil every day, then you might consider you're reducing stomach inflammation, and there could be an infection there, such as H. pylori, that's
Mm.
eating the tissues of the stomach, causing the stomach ulcers. So instead of just taking Advil, take Advil and take a gram of Scutellaria twice a day with philodendron and some olive leaf extract in a little shot of water, and that will soak into the stomach tissue and kill the infection. And then
What
the
about
stomach ulcers.
antibiotics?
Antibiotics are good, if you can get the right one. But antibiotics won't penetrate cysts or biofilms. And so antibiotics are good at getting an infection under control, but what happens is infections go dormant. And when they go dormant, they still proliferate. And when they proliferate, they wait till the body weakens through a traumatic experience or chronic stress, or, you know, um, something else,
Yeah, yeah.
or the
Both
pathogenic
seem
load just
good.
increases.
Both
Go ahead.
seem good short term. But if you don't want to get into a chronic situation of Advil every day or
No,
antibiotics every day. Yeah.
right.
Do you have any a story of any that was like miraculous for you or a memorable patient you helped?
Oh, many, every single one of them. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're all just really good people, all driven people,
Mhm.
um, uh, driven for health, people who want to feel good. Um,
Have you helped like families?
yeah, yeah,
Like whole families?
I have actually. There was a family of a woman, and I think she has six daughters, and she has a husband, and her husband was fine. I saw him, I evaluated him, and he presented as if he was totally fine. But her and her daughters, they all presented as if they had a babesia infection. She had I think the youngest of them was 10 at the time. There was a 10, a 12, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, and either 18 or 19-year-old, and her, and she was in her 40s. And these girls were like, when I first met them, they none of them had ever gone to school. They were
Wow.
they were bad. They were a mess.
Wow.
I they had tons of symptoms, just crazy symptoms, chronic dizziness, chronic migraines, um, burning eyes where it felt like their eyes were on fire. Um, they couldn't sleep. Um, uh, Intermittent episodes of tachycardia, pain in their bodies, urinary retention, constipation, um, lots of symptoms, and
Jeez.
that's just a very small amount of symptoms that one person would have. And just it was bad. They were in bad shape, and I treated all of them and cleared all of them of their
Wow.
infections. And she had been fighting this for a long time, and she started buying my formulas, and I realized that she had started buying my formulas. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, I recognize that you've been buying my formulas. If you want some help, let me know. I might be able to help you out. She, hired me on as her doctor and her girls' doctor, and and got them all to a place where they're all thriving, they're all happy, they're all
Wow.
glowing, and they're just, now they're excited about life. They're afraid of, they were initially afraid to go outside, because they didn't want to get bit by mosquitoes and stuff. But I'm
Yeah.
just like, I also educate people once they're done and during the time of treatment how to prevent this from happening again.
That's what
You
I was gonna
know,
ask you is
yeah,
once you get through the whole process, do you have a protocol for, okay, so this is how you live your life going forward so you can
yeah,
hold on to your health?
exactly. I do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, do you treat people outside of Oregon?
If the state allows for it, I will see people through Zoom, yes. And a
Okay.
lot of times the state will allow for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we will definitely be linking all that information. But if anyone
Cool.
wants to get in touch with you, they can
Yeah.
reach out to you to see, and then you'll be able to tell them if you can treat them or not, because I assume
Yeah.
you would
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
Because I mean, and we're just touching on a blip of your knowledge, like
Yeah.
just the tip of your knowledge on all of this. So
Yeah.
just for anyone listening, I I think you really should consider reaching out to Dr. Lynch about all of this because as you can tell, it can be life changing, even if it's just to have a conversation with him about what's going on with you, because it's life changing,
Absolutely.
100%. So, and
Yeah.
how long have you been practicing now?
Not long, actually, since 2018.
I mean, that's what is that? Life's gone so fast. I swear,
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
So,
But there were 6 years before that
of
of
school,
education. Yeah.
of
6 years
school,
of education and being sick myself. I was
and
sick
then
in school.
yeah,
I was
going
told
through
to
it
drop
yourself.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that experience actually has probably made you a better doctor, right? Because
I
your
think so.
empathy for your patients, you get
Yeah.
it.
I know what they're going through.
You know what they're going. You'll
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I find with going to anybody with when you're
Mhm.
sick or having issues,
Mhm.
doctor, naturopath, whatever, it's the first challenge is that getting them to listen and really hear
Right.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
And to me, that's always a sign I'm in the right place if they're really hearing me.
Mhm.
So your
Mhm.
empathy, because of your own experience, has got to play into the success that you're
Yeah,
having
for
with your
sure.
patient.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I care about my patients, definitely.
So you've been practicing in Bend. You have your practice,
Mhm.
and you have your wife and your son.
Mhm.
How are things going in your personal life?
Yeah, well, things have taken a quite the change recently. My my wife just left me. I believe it was May 2nd. I helped her move out into her own house, and Um, we share our son. She gets him 7 days, and I get him 7 days. So, we're at least taking a break. Whether that looks like divorce or not, I'm not sure. But it was her idea, and she wanted a break. So,
Did you have any idea that this was coming?
yeah, yeah, I did. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
do you feel that it's something that had been building up for years and was due to more communication, or what would you say probably the main reason is? Or is there 100 little reasons?
Well, there's a few, but one of the main ones was the parenting dynamic. She I I I love my kid. He knows I love him. I give him love, but I also hold him accountable. And I also, you know, provide consequences when I feel that they're needed and I feel that they're reasonable. Um, my wife doesn't believe in consequences. I don't think that, she holds our kid accountable as much as need be. And when I do, it becomes a shit show. Um, for example, we're sitting at the table and my kid, like I grew up with manners were important. I value manners, manners in life, manners at the table, manners wherever, greeting people, shaking hands, what have you. And so, it's just like my kid, he tried you know, to stir things up, and I gave in to it. And I just, like, for example, I'd be like, hey, bud, please put your napkin on your lap, for the 50 millionth time, you know.
Yeah.
And he'd just kind of roll his eyes and look at his mom and know that his mom would stick up for him. And then she would just be like, she's like, in my house, manners didn't really matter. And so, and then he would just like sit there and chew with his mouth open. And I'm just like, it just wasn't pleasant, to sit at the table with my family with, eating, because here my kid in junior high school is like trying to stir things up. He's actually doing it and succeeding. And I'm the only one holding him accountable. And then it just becomes this triangular stupid thing. And and then that's one thing. And then whenever I would have a conversation with him, she was like right there, like looking and making, and she's like anything I would say after the moment I'm done, she would say something like right on top of it to change my words into something else to make it how she wanted my words to look like to him. And
Right.
and I was just like, fuck, I can't even parent my kid,
Yeah.
so
It's a lot.
No,
it sucked.
it's almost, and that's not something you would know is going to happen until you have a child together. You can't predict that the two different parenting styles,
Right.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't have known that until, and
Oh,
it probably was slow to happen, right? It probably wasn't so obvious right in the beginning when you first had him. But that as he grew and then,
yeah.
so it's kind of slow building.
It was.
So
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing to predict, you know.
It was a hard thing to predict. I will say that it can go both ways. You can't really blame anything. You can't blame trauma. You can't blame experience. You can't blame anything. You do what you do. You have responsibility for your actions, and you make sense of what you do and own it and live it. And that's what she owns and lives. And that's what I own and live. And it hadn't worked. And it's weird.
Well, when it
And
comes to parenting,
yeah,
you have to be a team.
you do. Yeah.
Even if you disagree, that has
Yeah.
to be behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
we'll talk, like almost like, okay, we're going to talk about this later, but you can't
Hmm.
do that in front of the children, or the child has to at least believe you guys are on the same page,
For
because
sure.
the child is going to push the boundaries as far as they can
Yeah.
over and over and over.
Yeah.
And if there isn't a set boundary, and they can tell the parents aren't on the same page, they're going to take advantage of that.
Oh yeah.
They're just gonna stir the
They're
pot like you're saying. Yeah.
do, right? Especially as teenagers. So the number one thing is, okay, we may disagree on where the peanut butter should go, but we'll talk about it in our room later. We're not going to
Right.
argue about that they put
Yeah.
the peanut butter away wrong in front of them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You
Yeah.
have to have each other's backs, or else you lose control of the situation,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Oh,
So
for sure. I made note of that so many times, and it just it wasn't ever harnessed. We went to see a counselor, and the counselor was like, you can't do that. You got to talk about these kinds of things in private. You can't interrupt. You blah blah blah, and and so
It's a respect for your spouse too.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's
it
the
is.
and I'm sure it was what do you do in that situation, right? Because you probably never thought it would end up in here, right? In your wildest dreams.
I know. Yeah,
So, it's interesting because I think a lot of Gen Xers midlife are separating and are getting divorced for many different reasons.
yeah.
But I think a lot of times there's unpacked trauma, or there's trauma that needs to be dealt with. And sometimes in our midlife is when it's really hitting us, and we're either going to acknowledge it and resolve it and heal, or we're going to continue to deny it. But when that happens too, it comes out in other ways.
Hmm.
So, and I'm not saying that's what
Well,
happened here,
I think
but
everyone deals with it differently too,
yeah,
though.
yeah.
And that's where you may not it may not
That
line up.
yeah, the breakdown of
Friction.
the relationship,
Yeah, yeah,
'cause it's like because things either need to be dealt with or not,
yeah,
and if they're not, then there's a breakdown.
yeah.
Yeah, because you hit that point, so, I mean, I either way, I wish for you on your path, um, peace with this situation, whichever way it's
Thanks.
gonna go.
Yeah.
Because I know
Yeah,
you're still this is pretty fresh still.
yeah. It is
So
fresh. Yeah. I mean, I love my wife, and but I also realize that, man, if we can't get it together, then it might not be. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. It might
yeah,
not be a good match,
and it's
and
a
it's
huge life shift,
it
you know?
is. Yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. I really regard family as, a sacred thing. And, when I have my family, it's like I take care of my family. I took fucking great care of my wife, and I take great care of my kid. And family is really important to me.
Yeah.
Probably because I didn't have much of a family growing up.
Right.
And now when it's gone, fuck, it took me like a month just to get my shit together. I was like, and then it was like 8 months of knowing that she was going to leave. And I was just like, okay, it's like, I wanted us to work on it. She didn't. I was like, okay, so, I just got super bummed. I stopped working out, and I was anticipating her leaving, and then she left, and then I was just fucking bummed, and then after a month I was like, okay, here I am, time to get going. And
Mhm.
I got my life, I got some more time on my hands. It's time for me to kick some ass. And
Well, have you thought about, because I know you were really into mountain biking,
yeah.
snowboarding, um, didn't you, like, take people weren't you a guide or something? Like, you took
uh
people
I wasn't necessarily a guide, no, but I did ride a lot. It was my passion, It was like that was my thing, was snowboarding and mountain biking. And I've been mountain biking more lately. Been mountain biking with my son, actually. He likes to mountain bike, and we ride dirt bikes too, and ski together. But yeah,
yeah,
I've done a
I was just gonna say, like, going back to the things that always brought you happiness before, maybe putting more time into those,
totally.
you know? Like, when you
Yeah.
snowboarded, um, where did you go snowboarding? Where would you snowboard?
Basically where I would live. And so if it was Ashland, it was Mount Ashland. If it was Bend, it was Bachelor. If it was Utah, it was, many different, it was either Snow Basin, Snowbird, Solitude. And then I would take trips to, Washington or Alaska. I would snowboard in Alaska, snowboard in Washington, Crystal Mountain. And
Alaska had to be insane.
Alaska was pretty amazing. Probably the most amazing place I've ever seen in my life, been to. The people there are just incredible. Everybody's just kind of stuck in the 90s, and it's awesome. And they're super super nice, super sweet, um, and very hospitable. The mountains there are absolutely incredible.
Sure.
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
you thought about maybe planning a trip, like a snowboarding trip out there?
Yeah, I have thought about that. I'd love to do that within the, next couple of years. Go up there with my son and
Yeah,
and take him up
return to
there.
some of
Can
those
heli ski
places.
or
Yeah.
heli board
Did
up
you ever
there.
do
Yeah,
that? Did you ever heli-ski or
I
heli?
did. Yeah.
Did you really?
Uh-huh. Yeah, Brian, you remember Ryan McCune, who stayed with me in the Guam house for a little bit? Kind of like back then he was kind of like a skater punk kid, but super nice.
I think vaguely.
Yeah, he hung out with what's his name? From Juno.
Mark?
God, Mark Schultz.
Mark Schultz.
Yeah,
Him and
yeah,
I were roommates for a little while.
nice.
He broke his femur heli boarding, I think, up in Alaska.
Oh, no
Yeah,
way.
Yeah,
I
back
remember
then.
him.
Yeah, remember
Yeah.
him? He
Yes.
was in
yeah,
a full cast for a while because he broke his leg doing that.
yeah. Mark Schultz is a king, man. He's a badass. He rode for Glissade for a while. He rode in the X Games. I believe he won the X Games one
What did
year.
he ride?
He rode the Border Cross.
Okay.
He rode a Glissade, a 168, and I actually bought that board from him that he rode on, and
Okay.
it's my favorite board I ever had. It was a custom board that was made specifically for him.
Oh, no
And
kidding. He had
yeah,
a picture. I remember he had a picture. It was framed on this wall, like either the house or his room, of him
yeah.
doing a flip.
I
And
remember that photo.
and back then,
Hmm.
that it's not
Yeah.
like it was a digital camera. You had to do that with film
Yeah.
and all that.
Oh
So
Yeah.
it
yeah.
was
Yeah.
pretty good.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
he's a
Him
good
and
dude.
Eric Peterson, they were buddies. They hung out quite
Yeah,
a
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Eric was running ref guides, I think, right? Wasn't he
He
floating down
was.
like the Klamath or Rogue or something?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you would jump out of a helicopter and snowboard?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you do that?
Valdez.
Well, I
Valdez,
think a
Alaska.
helicopter
Valdez.
lands. It lands, right? You don't
It
jump out.
lands.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
was
You don't.
picturing like a Mission Impossible thing.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Watching
people
too much
have
TV.
jumped out,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
for staged photography,
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But
But
no, we
Valdez, wow.
Valdez, AK, yeah,
What were those old skiing movies? What's that dude's name? He would make the sneak.
Warren Miller.
Warren Miller, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
hmm yeah.
So,
There's a lot of Warren Miller. There are a lot of Valdez clips on Warren Miller films.
how many times did you do that?
Quite a few. I mean,
That's
I went up there
crazy.
twice to do it, but the one time I stayed there for like a month and a half, and I stayed with Ryan. He's a guide, and he owns a mountain up there. His dad owns a mountain, and it's
Wow.
huge. I mean, it's bigger than any mountain, most mountains down here. And but it costs millions of dollars to put a resort on there. But he rides snow machines and um, sleds up there, and then snowboards down.
Wow,
And he
that is
has,
so
Cool.
cool. Was there
yeah.
like when you were doing it, was it like a community of you guys that would go do this together? Of
Yeah,
like,
so in the spring, there's what's called the King of the Hill competition. King of the Hill competition is put on by, it used to be the World Extreme Skiing competition, WESC, who was put on by Ryan McCune's mom. She started it, and all the best skiers, or all the big mountain skiers from all over the world, would go to Valdez and compete and ski. There was like 3 or 4 events, and then the King of the Hill followed that, which was the snowboarding competition. And I would go up there for that. I wouldn't compete, but I would go up there during that time, and I would meet all the pros of that time and ride with them. And yeah, I rode like with all the leading big name snowboarders in the world up in Valdez, and it was absolutely incredible. It was these guys were pretty amazing, and I met my favorite my favorite person, my favorite rider, Matt Goodwill, up in I can't remember the name of the bar there in Valdez. We were all hanging out one night after riding. There was just a ton of people in the bar, and he walks up to me and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm just like, just hanging out. We were talking about the day, and he asked me my name. I asked him his, and he was like, "All right, well, maybe we'll ride together." And I'm like, "Yeah, sounds good. I hope so." And just super nice, humble guy, and he looked like he looked like me, I was like, it was weird because I'm looking at this guy who was like, 6 foot something, long hair, lean, just a nice, calm dude. And unlike any other snowboarder I saw there that was just a freaking loud skate punk.
Yeah.
And then Ryan walks up to me and he was like, "Oh, I just saw you met Goody, huh?" I'm like, "Who?" He's like, "Goodwill." I'm like, "No way." He was like, "That was Goodwill?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Whoa, shit, dude. That's fucking awesome." He's like my hero, man. I mean, that guy is fucking amazing.
When was the
Yeah.
last time you snowboarded?
I didn't ride this year, but I rode the year before.
Okay, so you're still
Yeah.
active doing it.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
impressive.
No,
For
that's
Yeah.
our
cool.
age, I think
Yeah.
I'd be that's really impressive.
I'm going to get a pass next year. I just didn't ride this year just because of, the whole family thing and
Yeah.
How
and I
far is
was
Bachelor from you?
oh, it's 25 minutes from my house.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
I
that's
mean,
Yeah,
you do
amazing.
live in a really nice, desirable
it
outdoor
is
activity area.
for
Yeah,
sure.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
mentioned herbs, how you work with herbs, it just
Mhm.
this is I don't think this is an herb, but I do have to ask just with what you do.
Mhm.
Have you ever done an ayahuasca experience?
Yeah, I have. It's well, one of the things that my spiritual teacher says not to do is to alter the consciousness. He's
Mm.
like, become one with God consciously, don't alter your consciousness. Don't fix it. And so I prayed one night, I was going to do, I got invited a few times to do ayahuasca and it never felt right. And then my friend invited me and I was just like, "Yeah, I like you. You're cool." And she said, it's really cool. It's with these two women it's just a magnificent experience. And and she says that, you never know how things are going to unfold, but um it's uh it's pretty incredible. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. Um and so uh, I remember praying one night. I'm like, "Look, I know you don't want me doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just protect me, stand by me, keep me from going to the hospital." you know, and uh, and so I've done a lot of things that you don't want me to do. And this is one of them.
And so where did you do it?
Oh, I did it up in Washington over by Mount Rainier. And there was a piece of property up there with a big yurt. And and I think there were about 10 of us, 9 or 10 of us there, and a shaman, and then her uh, assistant, and so it was very ceremonial. I believe she was South American of some kind. I don't know where, but she was I don't know, a shaman. Uh, and then there was this shaman's assistant, and it was they talked about it, and it was like a 5 hour journey, I think, maybe 5 6 hour journey one night, and then the next night it was the same. And then the next day after that, there was like a breathing ceremony, which I was like, okay, well, whatever. I, I practice Kriya. I'm, I'm a pranayama, I have a mastery in this, so
Yeah,
no big
yeah.
deal. But it was a big deal. And even that was just like fucking blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, these guys, they were the real deal. And have you guys done ayahuasca?
No, but I researched it and I've seen videos about it. I'm too scared. I'm too nervous.
I was
But
gonna say, if you're into it, I'm game.
so did you do it 2 nights in a row?
I did, yeah.
Well,
So
how would you describe it?
well, it's different for everybody, and we all took the same amount. And the person to my right, we all had our zones. We had this great big huge thick mat with some blankets and a few pillows and knee pillows, all this comfort stuff. We had a barf bucket next to us in case we needed to vomit. And because there's a lot of vomiting that goes on with some people, and luckily I didn't never got nauseous. And and then the person to my right, he was vomiting the whole time, dry heaving. It sucked, but whatever. He had his own trip, and then everybody had their own trip, and then there was one other person who experienced nothing. My friend she left. She left her body, and she was like, she couldn't remember a thing, but she was going through it hardcore, and she needed a lot of attention from the shaman at the time, and they were like working on her and doing all this body work and stuff, and she was flopping around like a fish, and and me and during this time they were playing this. They were like, they had drums, they had all these Native American like cymbals and bells, and they were singing and they were dancing, and they were dressed in this native outfit, and they were just amazing. It was just this godlike experience that was just absolutely fucking incredible. And they made it so incredibly amazing. Just what they did, what they know was like
What
wild.
During that, what kept your attention? Because if you've got someone flopping around like a fish, another guy throwing up, that sounds heavy to me. Like if I'm tripping, I don't think I want to be dealing with that. But
You have your
how
own
does that go down
experience.
like that?
You have your own experience. I had
Yeah, yeah.
my experience. I was holding on for dear life for probably a good 3 hours. And basically, luckily I had some windows above me in the yurt. I chose a spot where there was windows. Like if I were to lay down, I could look at the sky. I wanted to be able to see the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I drank the medicine, the mother, what they call it, and I was like, okay, here we go. And you know how you start a mushroom trip and things kind of start to get like woozy, and you're like, okay, 45 minutes of this until it really opens up and gets nice. Well, that never happened. Well, I mean, it did happen, but not for the 3 hours. And so it got to the point to where I was hallucinating like a motherfucker. I was like, it was so freaking crazy, hallucinogenic, and dizzy at the same time. So, I mean, I was like extremely dizzy. Everything was moving. The light overhead and it was dark, but it was like a dim light, and it was doing its own breathing thing. I don't really remember too much of all the hallucinations I had the first night, but it was mostly just how I felt in my body. It felt like I had like, if you were to put your hands and hold on to the ends of the power lines of uh the outside power
Yeah, yeah,
lines,
yeah.
like all that electricity just pumping through all
Felt
my
alive.
nerves. Oh my God, it was too much. It was way too much. And I felt all this electricity just bursting through my body, and I was hallucinating like a motherfucker, and I was just like laying there looking at the sky, and every time like I could feel my consciousness wanting to slip out of my body, out of my control. And it's okay if I leave my body, but it's not okay if it leaves my awareness. And so
Mm.
in order to keep my awareness, I had to fix my attention on something different like every 5 seconds. It was like, okay, that light bulb, that plant, that this, that this for like 3 hours in order to just keep my awareness with me.
So it's like a 5-hour ride.
Yes. And, after 3 hours of it, it was like I start to come down, and then I'm like tripping. And, then I'm like, okay, I can sit up now. I can sit up and I can watch and I can listen. I can be a part of this experience a little bit more, observe how everybody else is doing. And it was just so spiritually magical what these women were doing. It was like, it just blew my mind.
And is it the
And
only thing you ingest the whole time, or do you come down and, like, pass around a pipe and smoke weed or anything like that?
no, at the very end, like when everybody has come back and everybody's like clearly back,
Mhm.
then they bring in this great big huge like platter of different types of fruit, like
That sounds so
fruits and
good. Yeah,
berries and stuff like that. And we're just like, oh boy, that looks fucking good.
yeah.
And, and so then we eat some watermelon, take a little drink of some water. And,
What's the
eh,
goal though? Like what did you get out of it?
well, that was one experience. And my next experience had to do something with the first experience. So, um, you go in with the second experience was completely different than my first experience.
Mhm.
Um, but the intention that I went in with was to be more productive with my work, to um, just become more pure, a more pure individual, and to be uh, to to somehow magnetize, energy to fulfill my mission on this planet, of what I feel like I need to do. And so that was my goal. What did I get from it? I don't know. Um, you hear of these miraculous stories of this, that, and the other thing. I will say my second, uh, and this may have something to do with it, my second experience the next night. Sometime it was for some people it was more intense. For some people it was different. For some people it was more mellow. For me, it was different. The next night, it was for me is I felt this so much energy of love physically flowing in waves through my body. It was so much and so intense. It was like it was too much. It was
Hmm.
too much for me to handle. It was too much love. It was too much. It was too much. It wasn't arousal like sexually, but there was a component of that type of love there.
Mhm.
And, but it was like just this overwhelming, like if it could be water or something that flowing up through my body consistently of love. And I was just like, holy shit. It was like I was almost sick with it.
Wow.
And then I had these, and then I was hallucinating, and I was inside of a human body. And being a doctor, I think about what I'm doing. I think about what I'm doing and my own body, and I think about what I'm doing and with other people's bodies inside their body. That's what I think about, during the day. And so here I am inside of a human body, and I'm seeing like, I'm just like I'm smaller than a microbe. And microbes are like these giants. Like I'm seeing parasites, um, I'm seeing people's veins, their tendons, their bones, their blood vessels, and I'm seeing what's in their blood vessels. And then I see this, you know, this this crazy uh, you know, demonic looking like microbe just comes straight at my face and it's
My
open
God.
its mouth like it's gonna just consume me. And I'm like, you can't do that. I knew that, I was okay. I'm like, that's not gonna work. You can't do that. And then it disappeared. But I really like saw what I see, what
That's
I
incredible.
That's
visualize.
amazing.
It was
Yeah.
incredible.
That's amazing.
I
And
don't
the
know if I'm
message
prepared for
Yeah, and the message I got from that is like, you know, and on one hand, I was like I saw like something, and I was like, motherfucker, I will kill you,
Yeah,
and I do kill you, and then I checked myself, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm like, this is Mother Nature. I'm like, this is Mother Nature's other side. I'm like, Mother Nature wants me to see her in this way and respect her in this way and know that this is how the cycle of life keeps going,
mhm.
through these invisible microbes, keeping the cycle of life moving. And yeah, I mean, if we learn about what keeps the cycle of life moving and we can get on top of it and lengthen our lives and lengthen our quality of life, but still recognizing that this is what keeps the world green and pure um, and moving, then that to me that it was a message that I needed to understand that
Yeah,
I needed to respect you know, this force and these microbes. And some of them are dark forces, but there are dark forces associated with Mother Nature. And, it's to me, I understood that I need to respect them. And that's
that's
kind of what I got
amazing.
up.
That's a trip.
Yeah.
When did you
Yeah.
do that?
2, 3 years ago.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
that something you would do again?
I don't think so.
Yeah, one time
Yeah.
is enough.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
just I think all the things you've done, honestly, I keep going back to that moment when you were open and authentic and honest in the Guam house with
Yeah.
these guys. And I feel
Yeah.
like your life really began there, your authentic life. And then I
Oh,
look at
yeah.
everything
Yeah.
you've done.
Yeah.
Um, and not just becoming a doctor and helping people, which is what you do every single day,
Mm.
help change lives, but searching out your mom and searching out family and, raising your son and all of these real experiences, and on top of that, your snowboarding adventures and the ayahuasca and everything physically you've done, the mountain biking and the yoga and the meditation. Have you have you ever stopped to take stock to see where this all started and where you are now and all of the vast experiences you've had? And it's all because of you tackling life and your motivation?
Have I ever stopped to think about it?
Yeah, and like take stock of what you've accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it. And um I appreciate my life.
Have
Yeah.
you taken any moments to be proud of yourself?
Um Self-pride, yeah. I mean, I give a lot of credit to I give all the credit to God. I mean,
Mm,
I'm blessed, man. I look at everything as God's grace. Um So, self pride, I feel grateful,
mhm.
not necessarily proud, but grateful. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you would be an inspiration to anyone listening. I know you are just hearing your whole story. It's inspiring to me. And I know you feel the same way for sure. Um, but who inspires you? Do you have any peers or any other Gen Xers that have inspired you?
You know, there's a, I, there, there's people who change throughout my life who inspires me. And in regards to Gen Xers, I was thinking about this before the show. I was thinking about, okay, who are some Gen Xers that are inspiring to me, who I currently really appreciate and who I currently like. And you know, there's a couple who are on the cusp, that are outside the cusp, and by a couple of years, and I will mention them last because they were outside the cusp. But the first ones that I want to mention is I like Eric Prince quite a bit. I think he's a pretty incredible individual. I think Eric, he lived a life of really wanting to understand, um, history and the world and the way that, the world operates. And I think he has a lot of integrity in terms of, wanting to do the right thing. Um, and he wants to know truth on, what's going on. Dan Bongino, another one who really made, the best of himself. He may or may not be a spiritual person, and that's okay. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. But one of the things that I feel that Bongino has done is he's he's made the best of himself. Eric Prince has made the best of himself, and he still does. And one thing I want to say about Bongino is he's in a place where he was elected to be the assistant director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And to my understanding, this is a party that's mostly governed by democratic nature. And this may or may not be true, but that's just my understanding. And when he's, asked if Epstein was, you know, killed or if he committed suicide, and he said he was killed, regardless of whether he's right or wrong or being honest or not, it's like, if he's being dishonest, look at who he's running up against.
Mhm.
He is running up against some forces that are much, much bigger than him. And if you look at him and the way that he responds, if he's not right, take that into consideration. Don't judge him by his character, of saying that uh, Epstein killed himself. In my opinion, like, I don't judge his character.
Mhm.
He's, some people, their hands are tied with some certain things, and you just got to realize that. Ed Roland, he's another one. Ed Roland, he's the lead singer of Collective Soul. I just
Mhm.
love that guy. He's such a
Mhm.
cool dude. He's such a free spirit, and he's just full of grace, full of love. And I've seen him live and the Collective Soul with my son, and man, it was just an incredible show. And they're just incredible people, and he's such a good performer and a good man. Matt Goodwill, who's a Gen Xer, my snowboard hero, very humble, very good at what he does. And, I have to say that, there's aspects of Tom Cruise.
Mm.
There might be some things about Tom Cruise that I don't know about that, could be, we all have dark sides, but there's some rumors about his wife, his kids, his spirituality, what have you.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, man, he's a hard worker and he's very disciplined. And I mean, the guy works out, he eats 700 calories a day. He knows his body. He presents very well. He doesn't let people push him around. He's a very solid individual, and I've always enjoyed watching his shows.
Mm.
Um, Sean Ryan's outside the cusp
Mm.
of being a Gen Xer. He's more of a millennial by a couple of years, but he went into the military. So did he have much time to really get into the millennial type of vibe? Probably not.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I really like what he's doing. I like that he thinks outside the box. I like that he is interviewing uh, dignitaries from out of this country to see how they view of what's going on in the world, not just inside of our country. He wants to know the truth of what's going on also. He's a good man.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan, I mean, he's outside the box. He's by, a couple of years into the baby boomers. I think he was born in 63. Baby boomers started it, or not, Gen Xers started in 65. But Michael Jordan, man, he's not just a talented individual, but he's a workhorse. He worked harder than the energy that he had to win. It's like I watched, after watching him, listening to him speak, watching his show, it's like, man, that guy, like, I know what it's like to draw from energy that you don't have to make stuff happen. And he did that.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty incredible. Women, these are, Nancy Mace is new to me in terms of my awareness, but I was watching her the other day and I was like, and I looked into her and I'm like, wow, she's a badass, she's a really cool woman, um, she's she was the first woman to graduate from the Citadel. Um, and she's on the U.S. House of Representatives, and she's all about figuring out the truth of what's going on, also, to my understanding. And my uh, woman type of, what do you call, Gen Xer crush, that I don't think about, but when I do think about, if there is a crush, a Gen Xer crush, I'd have to go with Catherine Rollins from Hawaii Five-O, who is
Oh,
Michelle Borth. So I think she's pretty cool. I like her vibe. She's gorgeous, and she's seems to be a good woman too. But yeah, and
that's a good
that's my
list.
Gen Xer list.
I
Yeah,
think that's so interesting. I love that you have that.
yeah,
You've inspired me to maybe ask people for that.
It's got me thinking. I can't think of anybody, but
No, but I think if
yeah,
you sat down and gave thought
yeah,
to it,
yeah.
that may be something we add to the program. So thank you for, if you don't mind
sure,
us stealing this concept from
absolutely,
you.
go for it. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's great
Yeah,
because
very interesting.
we are such the generation that gets ignored and not talked about. Everyone goes boomer, millennial, Gen Z. And
hmm,
so it almost would be cool of us and our guests to speak about Gen Xers that have inspired them to kind of bring some awareness. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't know they were Gen X,
yeah,
because we've done so much for
yeah,
society and for the culture, but because we grind and we do what
hmm,
needs to get done and
hmm,
we aren't loud about things, people don't realize they forget about us, I think.
hmm,
I think that's
hmm.
great. I might bring that in
No,
with
that's
what we're
interesting. Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you for
and there's
sharing that.
one more person I want to mention, and that's Dave Mustaine. And
Who?
Dave Mustaine, well, maybe he's not quite a Gen Xer. Dave Mustaine is the lead singer of Megadeth, and
Mm,
Mm.
I just like the guy. I think he's very passionate about what he does, and he's a good man with good intentions. He's a good dad. He's a good family man. He's loyal. He's an amazing performer. Uh, he's unique, authentic, and I think that if we just stick to our authenticity
mm.
and know ourselves, then we're living pretty gracefully. We're living God's work.
100%. And so
Yeah.
many of us Gen Xers, many are just discovering who they are midlife because they've
Yeah.
been grinding so hard, or they've been in fight or
Yeah.
flight, or their
Yeah.
nervous systems have been going crazy from trauma. And
Hmm.
now that they've gotten to midlife, they're actually finally giving themselves grace. And that's when they're really starting to live their authentic life.
for
I
sure.
think it's an exciting time for Gen X and for
I
Gen
think so
Xers.
too.
I
Yeah.
really do, and I think
Yeah.
we are changing aging.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the boomer silent gen, we're
Hmm.
changing aging. Like, we're gonna keep living and
Yeah.
up into 100. Yeah, we're gonna keep, tackling new things, reinventing ourselves,
Yeah.
starting businesses,
Yeah.
snowboarding in Alaska at,
Yeah.
60, all the things, like, nothing's gonna stop us. We take no
Yeah.
excuses,
Yeah.
and, I think that we'll be a great example of how
Hmm.
to age for the millennials and the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas.
I love that. And, if I can, say something with that, what I'd like to say is, Gen Xers they're coming into more power in life right now, like you said. And, this is the time when, they are going to be showing up and shining and having an impact with society and with this world more so than any other time in their life. And, I just, from my experience and from what I know, one thing that, not that anybody's asking, so I'm imposing, is, uh, you know, get over your evils, get over your shit. And when you get over your shit, get over your fucked up tendencies, whatever they are, identify them, look at them, get over them, and then God will move you. Grace will give you the life that you are supposed to give this world.
Yep. Or
Yeah,
another word for it is unpack them. Unpack them
exactly. I
and
love
leave
it.
them on the side and
Yeah,
unburden yourself
right.
because it creates space. As
Mm-hmm.
long as you're holding on to
Yeah,
things you shouldn't be,
right,
there's no space for what should be. You have
right.
to get rid of it and
Yeah,
create the space so what is meant for you can come.
for sure.
So, no, and I pray and hope for that for all of us for sure. So, and
Yeah,
on
me
that
too.
note, the last question I always ask our guests is, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Wow. Um, I know the answer to that question, but it feels um it I'll just say what I feel, and hopefully it comes through. Um, I see myself in 5 years as an individual who's put forth um, knowledge and inspiration for people of the causes and sustainers of disease in, you know, a big way. I want to get my message out there and how to prevent this from happening, how to eliminate it. Um, and I kind of want to be it's not that what I want to be is I want people to wake up and see what's really going on here, and health wise and medically. And I'm not going to share everything I know and what I see in terms of you know medicine. I'm not here to be a whistleblower, but what I am here to do is to help sh- people understand the causes and sustainers of chronic illness, and how to get their health and their life back and keep it back. I also would like to open up an inpatient clinic at some point, to for people who can't help themselves get on their feet, to help them get on their feet, and then educate them once they get on their feet to help take themselves further to their next levels of health. So those are some goals I have. And so I want to write. I'd like to talk, publicly, do some traveling, obviously do some posting. I started that a while back before my separation, and then I stopped everything because I just kind of went dark for a while because of my separation. And now I'm back, and so I got to get working, and so those are some goals I have,
Those
and
are great
to
goals.
play more music.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
continue to use the outlets that bring you joy.
absolutely.
Music
Yeah,
being one.
yeah,
And you had touched on writing. Have you
yeah,
thought about putting your knowledge into a book?
yeah. I've started writing a book. There's I could write books and for a long time. It feels like, but yeah, I like the idea of writing. It's, I have to work and, make money and pay bills and, and have free time to nourish myself and, and work on my house. And
Yeah.
when there's time to write, then write. But,
Yes.
Writing's hard.
it is.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's because like
Yeah.
you're saying, you're
Yeah.
nourishing yourself, but writing is almost draining because it's such
Yeah.
an outlet that it takes a lot out of you. And you're
It
like,
does.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's something that um, I think I've always thought God kind of is at the hand of when you're ready, when he's ready to have you release something like that, it just kind of happens effortlessly. So for
Totally.
something like that, you may kind of be humming along in your life and then all of a sudden it happens. It's
Yeah.
that moment,
Right. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
there, it's
Yeah.
existing, and then
Yeah.
that moment will happen because it'd be an amazing way for you to get this information to the masses, to many more people, you know,
For sure.
to spread that word. So, but I think
Yeah.
those are amazing goals. They're
Thanks.
centered around helping people, and that's what you do, and that's what's so
Mhm.
inspiring. And
Yeah.
like I want to go out and tell everybody, wait, you don't understand. So I can't
Yeah.
even imagine how that feels for you to have the knowledge and to kind of have to
Yeah.
temper yourself as you go through life because
well,
you know.
what's interesting, and I think, this may be commercially, but Gen Xers, we don't accept the status quo, right? Whereas the
Right.
boomers ahead of us, this Western medicine approach is what they know, and it's
Yeah.
gospel. They just won't question it. I
Totally.
think a lot of us are like, no, no, this is kind of, it's bullshit. This
Yes.
chronic disease is not getting solved. Let me look at other
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Right.
What better way to heal yourself than to go on to a retreat in Eastern Oregon Bend and hook
Yeah.
up with you?
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
So I think it's an interesting thing in my mind. I'm ready to create, like, my knee really hurts, Pat. I'm going to come see you. I
Nice.
need I need a month
I
with
think we
Pat
need a corporate
in
family
Bend.
vacation
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
meet with Pat. But we are going to put the link, of course, in the description. But if people want to more information about you, what is your site?
Well, drpatricklynch.com is one site. Trillium Health Solutions is another site. Skyridge Acupuncture is another site. So acupuncture is a part of my practice. It's not really what I use to help people get people well. It's just the name of the website and a practice that I use
Okay.
for, means of pain and stuff like that, or acute situations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll link everything. And again, we
Okay.
can't thank you enough for sharing your story. It's an amazing story and for sharing your wealth of knowledge on health, but just your life story is where you came from and where you are now is phenomenal. So, and we knew you, like we
Yeah.
met you when you were just like in that one moment, and then of course we've been friends since then, but we haven't lived near each other. We haven't been in regular contact. So it's been such
It's been
a
too long.
joy for
Yeah.
us
It's
to
been
be
too
able
long.
to
Yeah.
catch up on
Well,
your
you
life
guys are
and,
some of my
you know,
favorite people, and I think
same,
about you often.
You're one
same.
of ours as
So
well.
Pat was at our
thanks.
wedding.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
I
The
sure
Very
egg
small
do.
hunt?
wedding. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being late for the airport
Oh
too,
my
almost.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's right. You were
Oh my
with
gosh,
us.
you were with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick story.
Yeah.
Um, the phone rang and I answered it and it was Kendall saying Nicole, and I was like, we slept in. And I was like, what? And she goes, where are you? And then I looked at the time, and we quickly all grabbed our stuff, threw it in the car, and I think you
I
drove.
drove, yeah.
It should have taken 20 minutes to get there, and we
Yeah.
got there in 10.
Yeah, we were fine.
Nice.
We were doing
Right?
like a
Nice,
Do you
yeah.
remember that?
down
I don't remember
205.
that part, no.
Because weren't
Yeah.
you with us? Were
I
you
think
at our house? Or were you at the
Was
airport?
it Bob Check?
No. So what happened with me is I left. I left the hotel, and my goal was I went to Vegas with like $200, and that's all I had. And and so I spent all my money except for like $10, and so I went out to uh, I don't know, a couple of casinos to play some blackjack to see if I can win some money back. And I won all my money back. I got
Wow.
$200 and made it to I think there were limos or something that were taking us to the airport. I can't remember what they were.
Yeah.
And I made it to the limos like right as they were leaving. And I was like, sweet. And I remember whoever it was that was there was like, man, we were just about to leave without you. Yeah.
Okay, so
We almost didn't make our
were-
wedding.
Oh yeah, you
Uh-huh.
were almost late leaving Vegas.
Yeah.
We almost didn't make it to the plane to get us to Vegas.
Oh, okay.
So-
We drove down to Eugene the night before to pick up her wedding dress, and we were
Yeah.
up late till 2, 3 in the morning
Yeah.
or something. Had like a 9 a.m. flight, and we made it from our apartment to the Portland airport in literally like 10 minutes at most.
And it shouldn't have taken 10 minutes. It should have taken
Yeah.
20. You know who was with us? Was John Bob. Remember
Yeah,
John Bobchek?
I sure do. Yeah.
He
How's
was.
he doing?
We haven't heard from
Yeah,
him
he's
in a
doing
long
all right. I
time,
haven't heard
but
from him.
yeah, it's been
Okay.
years. Last time we heard from him, he was doing great.
Yeah,
Good.
Yeah.
back in
So
Jersey, I think.
that was a fun wedding, though.
That
Yeah.
was a blast. I loved it. Yeah.
It was
a lot of fun.
great. We just had ourselves a party. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
like you're one of those people that are in our circle, have always been in our circle. We've thought about often, we consider you family, and so
Likewise.
this has been we love that we can share your story with our listeners. But for Brian and I, it's been just a pleasure to truly catch up with you
Yeah,
and
totally.
also learn
Yeah.
a lot of things we didn't know about you.
Yeah.
So it's been
Oh,
awesome.
well, it's been awesome for me too. And it's been awesome for me to connect with you guys and just feel where you guys are at in life, and it feels great. You guys are doing amazing, and I love it.
Yeah, we're
I love
having
seeing
fun
it.
with this. That's for
We're
sure.
doing
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
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 You have to come out to
Nope.
South Florida. Yeah, that's one
I'd
thing
love
you need
to.
to do. You need
I'd
to come
love
out
to.
here.
I
And I
look
think we
forward
need
to
to
it.
plan a trip to
I
Bend.
did look it up from Fort Lauderdale to Bend. The stop in Denver is 685.
Okay. And that's
Round
right
trip.
now.
Yeah.
That's like
Not
when it's like
bad.
really good weather.
No, it's not too bad.
No.
Yeah.
So there's an airport in Bend. You can land right in Bend.
Redmond, which is about 15 miles away.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I looked up
Yeah.
and so maybe it's even less expensive or easier.
Okay. We'll have
Yeah.
to look more into that. But again, thank you. And
Yeah,
for our
thank you
listeners,
guys.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. We loved having you. And we'd love to have you back again, in a
Okay.
few years and see where you're at and see how things are going
But
with
we'll stay in touch
life.
in between.
Oh, yeah. I'm
we
just talking
done
For
for
sure.
too much of a
yes.
drought here.
For our
Yeah, yeah.
listeners, we will have we'll have Pat on, Dr. Lynch, to see where he's at. Of course, we're going to stay more in touch with him.
Yeah.
But we would like to have you back in the studio and see where everything's at in life and how things are going and what new information you can share with our listeners and all that. So, but we will
Absolutely.
share Dr. Lynch's information. So if you do want to get in touch with him to discuss anything, you can. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them, and we will see you next time. Bye.